OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Very, very good Tuesday morning to you, 7:30, and you're welcome along to OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Myself, Shane Hannon, and it's Johnny Ward back again. Johnny, how are things?
Morning.
How are you keeping?
Good. Off to Roscommon races later on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so might head back home afterwards. Ryan Moore riding in Roscommon, fresh from riding the Derby winner. First time ever to ride at Roscommon, so that'll be a highlight. He doesn't give many interviews. He's like, I really like him. He's just no crap. Like, he's not like a showman at all. He's completely the opposite to Frankie Dettori.
Yeah.
But I've interviewed him before, and like he's a good interview to get. He's a nice guy. The family, they're a great family. But he probably just won't give me an interview, so we'll see how it goes.
You'll try your best, though.
I've tried Aidan O'Brien to give him a nod, give him. I don't know if Aidan's gone racing, but he has a runner in the big race, so we'll see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're quickly getting out of here afterwards and driving over.
It's not actually until an evening meet. We record a LOI Central podcast after this, so it's a busy day. Yeah.
Busy man, John.
Yeah.
Busy man. Tell you what, is a busy man. Stephen Gerrard. Both John Duggan was laughing in the office earlier and stuck the headphones on both of us to listen to this introductory message to his new job. So he is the latest big name to move to Saudi Arabia. He's signed a deal to become head coach of Al Ettifaq. So he's returned to management, of course, after being sacked by Villa in October. That was the last gig he had. He's obviously been biding his time, trying to wait for the right opportunity, an opportunity that maybe excites him, and one that he's always wanted to get involved with, and a team that he's been following since he was a kid. And that team is Al Ettifaq in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting move. A lot of these guys are heading and getting their big paycheck, and it's in one sense, I guess, hard to blame them. But
would you work in Saudi Arabia if you were offered like loads and loads of money? Maybe you would.
I was going to say it's the $1 million question, but it kind of is.
Probably get more, actually.
Yeah, you probably would.
Expats have gone over there for a long time, and it's an interesting question. Horse racing takes place over there. Irish trainers send horses over for these obscene purses over there. I don't know. I mean, you can also say, like, well, do you want to work for the US or a British government, considering what the US and British government have done overseas in Afghanistan and places like that? It's not black and white, but it's sad to see the role that Saudi Arabia is having in the world now. Like, I was looking up their managers here. Like, he's about 100 to 1 on to get sacked, because they've had, like, since 2017 they've had nearly 8-10 managers,
right?
Almost all non-Saudis, including Vladan Milojevic, who he came to mind. He was the manager of Apoel, I think, after Mick McCarthy.
Right.
And Apoel would have a similar. Milojevic wasn't there long. Apoel, where Jack Byrne was, would have a similar penchant for turnover. Yeah. But it's kind of sad, Shane. Like, Stephen Gerrard is 43. It was 43 degrees in the city that he's going to live in yesterday. I looked it up, Dammam, which is the east of Saudi Arabia. So they're somehow these countries are almost inhospitable now, without air conditioning. And Saudi has made all its money from oil, which is basically destroying the world that we live on. I don't know how long we even have left. And now they're trying to fly. It's really depressing.
It is.
You see how bad the climate is. Like, it's literally crumbling in front of our eyes because of fossil fuels. And all the while, Saudi Arabia is flexing its muscles and sports washing all over the place. So, like, I know a lot of people laugh at me on the climate, but, like, it's actually really depressing when you look at Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has all this muscle purely because of oil wealth. That's it. Yeah. And Mohammed bin Salman is like a bored young dictator who wants to kind of do stuff like set up new cities and sports wash.
The money that must go into even keeping pitches afloat, so to speak, as in, like, the dryness of the arid climate over there is outrageous. But it's kind of, and now I got to the point where we were watching that video earlier with Gerrard, and you're like, this, it feels weird, but we're almost getting used to it.
Yeah.
Where you see someone who we all recognise, and a lot of Irish people will be familiar and love Stephen Gerrard down the years, and now you see things like this and you're like, well, maybe for some people it doesn't change their opinion of Stephen Gerrard, for others it will. Similarly for Robbie Keane last week, going to manage Tel Aviv in Israel.
God, yeah, which is worse?
So, like, but it's almost getting to the point now where we're used to it.
Well, look at the players that have been immediately linked with the club, and this club isn't owned, in theory, I think, by the Saudi government fund. Yeah. Which brings to mind, and I really should do an article on this, which would be, be an interesting article to write. What happened to Saudi takeover of GAA United? Because we were basically first. GAA United was like one of the first, and I don't think it was so much a sports washing exercise. I think it was maybe to do with getting players over to Europe. But this was voted on by the people of GAA United, and we were told that it wasn't the Saudi government. But I mean, these lads, their stadium that Stephen Gerrard is going to is named after some royalty, so I presume I don't know if there's any separation from the Saudi government in Saudi Arabia in general, and Stephen Gerrard probably didn't have that many good options in England, I'd say, and in fairness, if you are to judge Stephen Gerrard, then judge all the thousands of Irish expats who've worked in Saudi as well.
If you're a ex-Liverpool fan, let us know in the comments this morning on the YouTube. Do you care that he's taken over a team in Saudi Arabia? Does it affect your opinion of him? Same with Robbie Keane. But Johnny, we have a special treat, a very special treat on this Tuesday's OTB.
Speaking of climate change,
speaking of it, so for the last year or so, I mean, most of my messages on Twitter have been no Sheehan, no party. Where's Owen Sheehan? Bring back Owen Sheehan. We get it every morning in the YouTube comments. Forget
about John Rogers. Where's Owen Sheehan?
Exactly, and understandably so. Popular cult figure, you might even say. A genius, a wordsmith, a poet, a Kerry man.
Like Mohammed bin Salman there for a minute.
He's everything. This man, Owen Sheehan, is everything to us, and we do miss him dearly. He's never been on the show. He sent in a couple of messages, little birthday messages or goodbye messages.
Well, he seems to be on a bus, like in transit.
He's always somewhere. I mean, following him on Instagram has been a journey in itself.
It has.
In and of itself. But we have a very special treat for OTB AM fans this morning, because for the first time since he left this building, Owen Sheehan is coming into us live at 1:36 a.m. local time from a hostel somewhere, I'm told, in Peru. Owen Sheehan, good morning, good night.
Good morning. That much is very much true. It's funny, Shane, because my Twitter mentions are often filled with this new, taller, more handsome, this guy with a nicer voice than you is doing a much better job than you in OTB AM. So
who's that?
Obviously the internet is just full of hate, Shane. And Johnny Ward bingo is already complete 6 minutes into the show. Climate change, GAA United, and racing. Tick, tick, tick.
F off and back to Peru, like warm. Jesus.
It just feels warm to be here. And do you know what? I'm always on a bus, because if I came on this show having said that I took a single flight over the last 2 or 3 months, Johnny Ward would have had me cancelled immediately. So
well, you can guarantee I have. Yeah, you can guarantee.
Johnny,
how are you?
You are great. Sorry, say that again.
How are you?
Sorry, just one more time. How am I? What?
How are you?
How am I?
Deep philosophical question.
Well. Sorry, John. There's a bit of a delay there. I'm very, very well. Thank you very much. As Shane says, I'm here in a dark hostel room. My face barely illuminated there, but I can barely see. But I have the place to myself. They've obviously cleared the decks for OTB AM here in this room tonight. They knew that there was star power like Johnny Ward and Shane Hannon coming into the room, so they had to clear everybody else out of here. But very, very well indeed. And big congratulations, Shane, on Monaghan's win at the weekend. Big times ahead. I know you spared your visit to Croke Park at the weekend.
Of course.
We've got 2 more big ones yet to come before the summer is out.
Yeah, kind of. We're getting so confident now. We went into the minor final, and now that we're into the senior semi-final as well. I just said, there's no point. We're not a quarter-final team anymore. Although the power rankings, the Tommy Rooney now power rankings have been a touchy subject for Monaghan fans. We were 9th last week, Owen, even though there were only 8 teams left. We'll find out later on this morning around 8 o'clock where we'll be. We're probably down to 10th, I'd say, after qualifying for the semi-finals. So the comments are rolling in. And Owen, I did say to you before the show as well, like it's going to be a Monaghan Kerry final, isn't it? Like, that's what we're all waiting for here.
It is just, the Classico of football is what people are waiting for, given the both sides of the draw at this point. People are looking at those 2 fixtures and tantalisingly looking in the mirror and saying, I want the big one, Monaghan and Kerry, and it is the big one.
Yeah, that's the one everyone wants. We've got the comments, Owen, absolutely rolling in. Where is Owen? We've answered that. He's in a hostel somewhere in Peru. We're not going to reveal exactly where. Rubnerd says we need him back to bring up the show's quality. Can he replace Shane? This is the general theme, Owen, this morning. So we've got Owen Yaboya, says Dave McLean. What is an expat? That's another deep philosophical question for us this morning. Owen, you're missed here. Have you missed us as much as we've missed you?
Miss you deeply. Whoever you are. Who's that person?
A lot of random Dave McLean. We've got Rubnert. Some of your old friends from the comments just I guess bouncing back in this morning once they saw your face. You actually look refreshed for a man who's been on the road for quite some time.
absolutely not refreshed. I'm broken and broke, and whatever sort of image you're getting off the screen this morning is a complete and utter lie.
I don't think you look fresh on, to be honest. I think you look absolutely wrecked. It's 1:30 in the morning. You've been travelling on buses for several months. Have you found yourself, though? This is the whole thing about these travelling expeditions. There we go.
I mean, you talk about Johnny Ward bingo. It was going to be Owen Sheehan bingo. He's in a hostel somewhere in Peru. If the line wasn't going to freeze at least once, we'd have been going, why didn't it freeze?
With all due respect to Peru and all that.
With all due respect to Peru. We got your back,
he's
Owen,
back.
Now we can see you, of course, but we can't currently hear you. But I mean, it looks great to just even see you, Owen. To be honest, like we could sit here. I think the OTB AM fans right now would just be quite happy. The quality of the show. I know you can hear us right now, but it's bringing up the quality of the show just looking at him. Do you know, having him on screen.
It's bringing up the quality of my life just looking at you guys. Like right back at you. If that's what we're saying this morning.
Someone says in the comments, James Sweeney says, Owen has spent enough time finding himself, it's time to go home. Someone says has Owen booked his hotel for the All-Ireland final, says Shane.
Listen, I have a flight booked home for the last weekend in July, which happens to be the week leading into the 30th of July. It's just I don't know what's on that weekend, but I just happened to book that flight back in February, March, whenever it was, and that's when I touched down on Irish soil. If there's anything happening that weekend, please let me know.
That is the most Kerry thing ever, isn't it? The confidence,
come back for the final,
borderline cockiness, like to book your flight for that weekend, to probably land into Dublin Airport maybe 3 or 4 hours before throw-in, bounce over to Jones's Road.
Completely bypassing Dublin, actually flying straight into Kerry Airport. We do have an airport of our own. I mean, I do not need to go to Dublin anymore. Could be up and down in the one day were there to be an All-Ireland final for Kerry, and I probably booked this flight the day after Mayo hockeyed Kerry, not only in the championship but in the league in Castlebar this year as well. So I mean, again, there's no connection whatsoever. I just want to be home for August. That's it. There is no connection whatsoever to whatever might be happening the last week of July.
How many countries have you visited?
I'm not sure. Maybe 10 or 12. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, Johnny. Sorry, I should have come prepared. But a few. But they're big countries, so maybe like 10 or 12 doesn't seem like an impressive number.
Jojo, of course, works on sound with us here. He had said this morning when he was testing your line that you look great. He said you look older and more mature. Like in a good sense, of course, and then he's also saying that your look reminds him of one of the actors in Narcos, which I think is definitely a compliment, but not Pablo Escobar.
I mean, you know, wait to stereotype South America there, Jojo. I mean, just show the narco tag there and straight away. But thank you very much. I'll take that as a compliment. I'm definitely looking older, that's for sure. That is one thing that is absolutely undeniable at this point.
Jojo, of course, is from South America.
He's from Brazil, so he's allowed to say it.
What were the football matches you visited been like?
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Like the best atmosphere, in my opinion, that I visited was Newell's Old Boys in Rosario. I was at a Boca game actually the very night before a Newell's Old Boys game. And maybe deep down I'm just a hipster who wants to be a little bit different, but I much more preferred the experience in Rosario at a Newell's game and seeing something a little bit off the beaten path. It's not off the beaten path. I mean, they're like a global club. Like the two most famous Argentinian players of all time are associated with Newell's. They're not a hipster club whatsoever. However, the Boca thing is pretty well blown up. It's not overly touristy, but it's pretty touristy. So to be one of the only non-Rosario natives in the home section at a Newell's game is pretty special, because that is an incredible theatre of sport, the Bielsa Stadium. And I'm sure you guys saw recently the free kick that Messi nailed in there at the Riquelme testimonial, I think 2 weekends ago. It's a special place, and that for me was probably the highlight. A top tier football, but I'm also a sucker for average grassroots football as well, and there was a particular experience in Belize which was very entertaining and very funny, and it was like a junior B GAA match at home, and it made me feel all fuzzy and warm inside going to a Belize Premier League game. So two ends of the spectrum there, I think.
I have to ask you seriously, like, what's it like travelling for that length of time?
It's like I'm an unbelievably privileged person to be able to do this. So that's like the first thing. Like, you do feel an unbelievable sense of, I'm incredibly lucky to do this above all else, and you feel like such a spoiled brat whenever you complain about it whatsoever. And the only complaints you do have are just tiredness and maybe the amazing things becoming a little bit less amazing after a while, because it becomes your routine very quickly. Like the first 2 months of being in Latin America are obviously insane. Everything is so vibrant, and the vibrancy settings get turned down because it essentially becomes your home, and this life becomes your normal life. And as I say, the vibrancy settings get turned down a little bit, and you get 3 months in and you feel like a complete spoiled brat, as I say, because you start to think to yourself, how do I re-find the excitement once again? So after a while, Johnny, it just becomes about trying to do different things, trying to travel in a different way that makes things a little bit more exciting, which sounds terrible when I say it out loud, given we are some of the most lucky people on earth that we are able to do this. People who are from Europe, who are from North America, who earn a wage that gives people the ability to do this. The amount of people I've met out here, people who would be earning a good wage for their country, who find it obscene that we have the ability to go to a different continent for a year. You couldn't count those conversations in two hands, that's for sure. And it just reminds you of how lucky we are. So
has it radicalised you?
I must say. Not radicalised in any sense. When you say what's it like, and you ask me for like one main emotion from it, I think it's a small bit humbling is the main emotion from it. But then again, I'm completely flaked emotionally at this point. I'm on the way home, so ask me again in 2-3 months, and I might have a more rational answer for you.
See, that's why we asked you to do it at 1:46 a.m. your time, because we thought we might get a few tears and philosophical kind of ramblings. That was certainly not a rambling. That was eloquent to a T, and probably answers the question: did Owen Sheehan find himself in South America?
I think he did.
No.
Yeah. Oh no, he didn't.
I think you have.
I've not, like, I found myself a long time ago. I'm just here. I'm just existing, guys. And like that. That's what I'm supposed to say, right?
That is profound.
Yeah.
That is pretty profound.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Connor exist, asks, therefore I am.
There you go. Connor asks, what has been your favourite country, Owen?
Argentina. No question about it.
No delay there.
From perfect. No delay whatsoever. Far from perfect country in many, many ways. That probably is part of the appeal, to be honest. An absolutely incredible place, and it's a conflicting place right now for a tourist. Economically, it's a very, very lucrative place to be. You get double your money when you're transferring your dollars or euros into Argentinian pesos right now. The flip side of that is that you're seeing serious economic suffering at the hands of or just on the streets and in the lives of every Argentinian. And in the middle of this 10-year chaos of inflation, they just won the World Cup. So it's this very, very conflicting society, and to me, that's something that fascinates me. So you throw in all the natural resources they have and all the incredible things that they have on the doorstep as well. There is not a question in my mind that Argentina was the highlight.
It is mad. Like, I remember Owen being in, I think it was in Cambodia or somewhere like that, and I was haggling with the fellow over like 50 cents or $1, and I just was thinking back, like, what are you doing? You're an absolute asshole here. Like, you might have 5 or 6 grand to spend on this trip, and you're haggling over $1 with somebody for whom it means something.
Yeah, 100%. And to be fair, there were definitely travellers who try and do this on the extreme cheap, and I can completely see their point of view. A dollar does make a difference on their end, but for me with Argentina, the crazy thing is that as a tourist, you're literally getting a benefit that the locals don't get. Like, they are earning Argentinian pesos, which is one of the most invaluable currencies in the world, and to them, dollars and euros are the most valuable thing in the world, and we are able to enjoy a steak, for example, for half the price that they would be able to enjoy it for, and yet it is their country.
That's mad.
It's horrible when you think about it, but at the same time, do we just not go to Argentina? Do we just not play by the rules that would benefit us? It's a very, very conflicting thing, and that adds to the fascination.
So if you come back, like, obviously broke from this holiday, and you were offered like shitloads of money to go to Saudi Arabia, would you go?
Oh, I've got a deal already signed. Stephen Gerrard TV is coming to a Saudi Arabian television station near you and I am your new host.
Off the Ball Riyadh, starring Owen Sheehan. We're getting loads of comments, Owen. Argentina because he pretends he's Alexis McAllister's cousin. You were on a hunt for Alexis's family, weren't you?
Yeah, like I don't know how much to give away here, but I have been recording a bit of content, and there will be stuff coming out over the next few months. I did spend. It's a bit of a spoiler, but I did spend a bit of time with the McAllister family.
Oh wow!
Quite how that actually happened. I do want to hold back, because the way in which this situation developed was probably the most bonkers thing that's ever happened in my life. The way in which this meeting manifested itself is crazy. I'll happily come and reveal it all if the content I produce is absolute dog shit. But I'm confident that I'll be able to put together something that represents the story quite well. If you just want to keep the powder dry on this a little, but I do want to tell the story in a way that does it justice, because for me it was crazy to be having coffee with Alexis McAllister's uncle, and he's like, I guarantee you, if Graham Potter is gone from Chelsea, he's going to Liverpool. And sure enough, he's a Liverpool player right now. But I think the story deserves to be told in a better way than me at 1:51 a.m. here trying to recount it all.
Owen keeping the powder dry for what'll be a big deal. I think this is going to be big.
big Saudi Arabian podcast network near you.
Have people said to you like you don't look Irish at all, or?
The most Irish.
He's pretty Irish.
I mean, Johnny, come on.
I am Owen from Kerry. I'm red. I've got red hair and I'm not Irish. We've got loads still flying in here, Owen. Good to see Owen. Surely one of the 2-star guest announcements for the podcast show in the Cork Opera House in August is Michael O'Brien. Watch this space. I don't know the answer to that question. You'll have to get on to the head on shows about that one. Nice to see Owen again. Rosario was beautiful. Good man Owen, spreading the foreign four love, says Stephen McCarthy. Has that been difficult watching the Kerry matches? A rake of Kerry games have been on GAA Go across the summer, so I guess at least Wi-Fi depending, you've been able to watch some of the matches?
Yeah, as Dion Fanning made the point in the Sunday papers on Sunday, watching via GAA Go for people outside of the country has never been an issue. In fact, it's been handy to have GAA Go available when you've been abroad compared to, say, what it would have been 5 or 6 years ago. So for me, I've been kind of a little bit separate to that conversation, and it's obviously been a debate that's been raging widely, but I completely get the sort of anger that's existed in Kerry with another game behind a paywall at the weekend. The one thing I would say is that every game has at least been available, with the exception of the Kerry Louth game, and I include all of the league games. I've managed to watch every single game, albeit not live, very often due to time difference of getting stuck in various places. But every single game, bar Kerry versus Louth, has been available on GAA Go or PG Cahir, and I've been able to see every single game. So it hasn't been too bad from my perspective, but I definitely understand that there's some unhappy people in Kerry who are living in Kerry right now, but having to shell out all that money over the course of the summer.
I spent I think 7 or 8 weeks in New York when I was 15, and my cousin's mother, she's passed away since. She's a lovely old lady. She just kept me the Irish Independent. She'd pick it up at one of the stands where you could get the foreign newspapers, and that meant the world to me. And I remember watching Michael Collins that summer, and I had no interest in any of that stuff, but I watched Michael Collins and I came back with this deep love of Ireland. Will you come back, Owen? Does absence make you love Ireland more?
I mean, you're telling me that I found myself, and now you're asking me these profound questions. This is your guys' fault, not my fault here. But yes, absolutely, Johnny. Our country has a lot of problems, a lot of significant problems, and there's a lot of people who live in Australia and who live elsewhere as a result of those problems. There's no question about it. But you do get talking to people who talk about Ireland being on their travel bucket list, or people who had it on their bucket list, visited, and had an unbelievable time. We have an amazing country, an absolutely unbelievable country, and I'm more acutely aware of that than ever. It may not be run in the most perfect way, and it may not be achieving its potential 100%, but in terms of its natural resources, its people, and what it is as a country, it's obviously, and it's more obvious to me right now, what an amazing place it is. It's obviously more profound right now because, it's GAA season, and when you see Kerry fans cheering an absolute annihilation of Tyrone, you just have this filled up energy of FOMO that I just want to be in Croke Park and be there. So you're catching me at a vulnerable time here, Johnny, and I know exactly what you're doing.
He does. He's trying to wrench that emotional, I guess, wring it out of you as much as we can at this time in the morning for you. But it is that thing, it's that juxtaposition between how mental some of these countries are, but also how beautiful they are, and the people and the food and the culture and everything else, and it's that as well. It probably makes you appreciate the things we have here.
But it's breakfast time back home, in the words of Richard Cooper.
This is exactly it. Like my brother went to, like, he was one of these people who's emigrated to Australia in the last couple of months.
The big man's coming back already, isn't he?
Well, if he said if Monaghan beat Dublin in the semi-finals, he's booking a flight. Like he's coming home. He's currently in Thailand. I think he's flying to Vietnam today, maybe.
He was not even going to make it as far as Australia. He'll be back for the game.
Exactly. But it's one of those things where he's been sending back videos in pubs in Bangkok at like 2 or 3 in the morning, watching Monaghan beat Kildare or beat Armagh on penalties, and the place just erupting, and like him and all his Monaghan mates just freaking out. Just it is that thing, Owen, isn't it? Like you feel so much more connected nearly to Kerry as well because of the distance.
And like sport is such an amazing mechanism with which we use to connect with our own country. Other people have other ways of doing it, but sport, I believe, is the most effective way of doing it. And it's not just an Irish thing. Like there was a couple of boys I met in Bolivia who had, like, in passing said, if Carlisle get to the League 2 playoff final, we'll fly home. And I was like, well, that's obviously a hilarious joke there, boys. Well done and all that. And sure enough, they get to the final. I look at their Instagram story. They're in Cancun, a billion miles away from Bolivia. I'm like, they're only going one way. And sure enough, they show up on television on Sky as Carlisle win the League 2 playoff final. Like, one of their mates is playing in the game. And I'm sure that's the same with your brother, Shane. Like, I think he's joking, but is he really joking? And like, I couldn't blame him at all if he flew home for such a once in a lifetime thing. I'm not writing Monaghan off next year or the year after, but if Monaghan were to beat Dublin, I mean, it is close to a once in a lifetime thing. And it's strange how more acute your association is with a sports team when you're a bit away from it. And that is probably saying something for me, given how stupidly and sickeningly biased I've always been towards Kerry, even when sitting in that studio.
Oh, never. I don't think anyone thought that, Owen. I mean, never.
Thank you, Sam.
There was never any cuteness coming from you at all, whatsoever.
Good.
But there's Bobby Dwyer, who you've probably missed, I'm sure, as well, from the YouTube comments.
Bobby, how are you?
He says, I'm no GAA fan, but I'd listen to Owen talk about anything now that I'm missing that much. Absence makes us love Owen more.
We should have Owen interviewing Shane on, like, how your stint has gone since he left, for the next few months.
Largest shoes I've ever had to fill.
Yeah, well, and
I have bigger feet probably than Owen.
You have.
We've never actually measured.
Metaphorically.
Well, physically, but metaphorically, Owen's shoes were certainly...
The boy done all right, Owen, anyway.
I'd rather have bigger physical feet than metaphorical feet. Thank you very much for...
It's like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the Uncle Jack who has the big hands and wants to let everyone know he has big hands.
Like, do you want Shane to do well, or do you want him to bomb? Like, be honest.
Well, it's too late now. He's about to come home.
Absolutely not. I would argue the little snippets of OTB end of the scene. Some snippets have gone more viral than others.
Some have.
I think Shane has done a magnificent job. So,
it's been interesting. Yeah, some of the interviews have been quite interesting, actually. Yeah. One or two people saw them.
I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
No, not a clue. Have you learned, or you're probably fluent in Spanish now by this stage, Owen, are you?
Well, I came out here with not much, and it's okay now. To be fair, I can definitely have a conversation in Spanish, and that's definitely better than what it was before I came out. Yeah.
What's any phrases, interesting phrases? How could you play down Kerry's chances of winning Sam in Spanish?
I think Yera in English is Yera in Spanish, so thankfully that one translates pretty clearly.
So there's no translation needed. That's interesting. Like, has you were kind of famed and still are famed for your food reviews, for your Japanese delicacies at the Rugby World Cup in 2019 and other trips as well. Like, how has the delicacy and wine and beer experience been? Like, I guess it differs from country to country.
It does. It's been excellent. I think that the beer experience has, by and large, been outstanding. The wine experience in Argentina was obviously brilliant. I didn't really shell out that much on wine in other countries, so I can't really speak. In terms of the food experience here in Peru, it's absolutely amazing. Argentina is absolutely amazing. Mexico is amazing. Everywhere else was pretty average. Colombia was terrible.
Wow.
Love the country. Love the country. Terrible food. Terrible native food, I must say. Everything that they do, Peru just do a lot better. Same with Bolivia. But yeah, no, I mean it's been good. I'm an unfussy consumer of foodstuffs, but Peru, Argentina joint top of the food chain. Let's go with that. Even ahead of Mexico.
What's the cost of your current accommodation?
The current, believe it or not, actually, I've got a free night here in this particular hostel. This hostel I'm staying in, Johnny.
So zero.
It's called. It's a €0, but it's a special case. This hostel is called the Wild Rover. So as you can imagine, there's a bit of an Irish influence to this hostel. There is a number of Tipperary men who run the chain of Wild Rovers. They're notoriously party hostel, and if you are a little bit uncultured, you tend to go, or not necessarily broke. They're not necessarily cheap, but if you're particularly uncultured, you would go to the Wild Rover. And that sounds very, very harsh when I say it like that. It's a place where you will meet other English speakers. Let's put it like that. It's very European hostel. Then there's an Irish pub in the middle of all of them. Basically, as an Irishman, you're going to an Irish pub to stay in it. And if you manage to stay in all of those hostels, you get a free night in the final hostel.
Oh.
So let's just say I've got a free night in this hostel, which means I have managed to complete the royal flush of staying in Wild Rover hostels. I haven't gone for your local Peruvian who runs a very authentic hostel. I've just gone for the Irish option where it's been available over the last couple of weeks.
I
promise I've been a proper tourist in those stages.
To paraphrase Homer Simpson, I think Owen Sheehan should walk out of here a free hostel. There we go.
Completed it, mate. He's completed the Wild Rover hostels. That's insane.
That's some achievement.
Oh well, listen,
being a Wild Rover for many a hostel, like. Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah, 4 for 4. Lads from Tipperary have set it up. So met them back in La Paz in Bolivia, where one of them, where they have an institution as well, and they're good people, and they are great hostels. To be fair, I don't know why I feel ashamed to admit that I've been in all of them, but it's a fact.
Owen is an institution. There you go.
He is an institution, and look, it's I guess that. They're obviously fans of the show, Owen. They must have been, these Tipperary lads, if you're getting the free night as well. They must have been familiar with you and your story.
I think it's a very undiscriminatory process. You either stay in all of them or you don't.
Right, fair.
Don't got any. Yeah.
Before we let you go, Owen, I know Tommy is listening in ahead of the Tommy Rooney Power Rankings. I don't know how that makes you feel, but he's standing by in the next couple of minutes to join us. But I assume when you come back, and that's maybe a spoiler for some people, if you come back, when you come back in the next couple of months, you're going to be coming in heavy-handed, grabbing that mantle of leader of the Power Rankings immediately.
But the thing about the Power Rankings is that they don't have any leaders. They are objectively and 100% correct all of the time. All it takes is a presenter. Like I've seen some statistical nerds on Twitter trying to justify the Power Rankings, which is quite hilarious given they need no justification whatsoever. As we've always said, they are 100% authentic, correct, completely flawless. And it doesn't matter who's in charge of them. They are completely correct. By the way, I see that we're 3 minutes past 8 back home. I thought we were coming on for a chat about Kerry's greatness, and we've wasted half an hour chatting about my travels, which is a complete waste of everybody's time. I would have thought. I thought you were looking for some incisive game of games analysis.
Never wasted. I just wanted to make the point that of course you should come back in and take the mantle. And look, excuse my language at this time of the morning, but the crappy quiz has gone to shit as well without your presence. So we need you back for that reason also. But on Kerry, Owen, explain to us where they should be in the power rankings at this particular, to coin Kenny Cunningham, at this particular moment in time, and where are they in the grand scheme of things?
But they're number one. I mean, they're All-Ireland champions, and they are in a rich vein of form. Quite how big the difference is between them and Dublin is unclear, but it is very, very clear that there are two teams at the top of the pile in Kerry and Dublin. And I think we will all admit, including you, Shane, that it would take a hell of a surprise for that not to be the final. I will say this, it'll take less of a surprise for Derry to beat Kerry than it would for Monaghan to beat Dublin. And again, I apologise to you on behalf of that, but I think Dublin beating Tyrone is, I would be very, very surprised if there are any non-biased pundits who will be predicting a Monaghan win over Dublin that weekend. there might be a couple of rogue pundits who could see Derry doing a job over Kerry, and I think that probably speaks to the fact that Derry will cause Kerry problems. I think Dublin would have had a much easier time against Derry. I think they've got a much greater bank of experience of breaking down that sort of defence. And I think Kerry probably still have a little bit of a point to prove on that front, given they beat Mayo and Galway and Dublin last year during the summer, teams that are more relatively open than Derry. So they've got a bit to go in terms of proving themselves in that regard. But I think they will, and I think we will have a Kerry versus Dublin final. I think Kerry are the number one team in the country. But if you're asking me to predict the All-Ireland at the start of the year, I would have predicted Dublin. Dublin were the team. I think I actually said it the week Kerry won the All-Ireland last year. I think Kerry would struggle to do back-to-back All-Irelands. And I think I actually predicted Dublin on the show to win the All-Ireland the following year. I didn't expect to be in a position to be watching Dublin 12 months later, where Jack McCaffrey and Kieran Kilkenny are being sprung from the bench. That bench is terrifying, and people will go back all the time, and they'll probably stop doing this after the Tyrone game. But anyway, for the last month, people have been looking at that Killarney performance where Mayo eviscerated Kerry. People now think that all those questions have been answered about Kerry. There is still one big question mark about Kerry, and it is the squad depth that they have this year. They lost Joe O'Connor to a season-long injury. He would have been the big breakout star for Kerry this year, and he's been a massive loss, and that could tell by the end of the year. Losing Jack Savage for the year, who walked away, was obviously a big deal as well. And I think that squad depth could be crucial in an All-Ireland final, or in an All-Ireland semi-final where Kerry have to go 75 minutes with the game level pegging, for example.
Yeah. Listen, Owen, we've keeping you way over time. 6 minutes past 2 local time in Peru. Enjoy that semi-final against Derry. Enjoy the All-Ireland final, potentially against Dublin, or of course Monaghan, when you just happen to be coming home on that weekend by complete coincidence and chance. Owen, it's been a privilege, an honour. The commenters are still going to comment in for the next while. We could have spoken for another hour and a half, but an absolute joy. Thanks for hopping on this morning.
The joy is all mine. Thank you very much, lads.
Brilliant stuff. The great Owen Sheehan joining us live for the first time.
He hasn't found himself at all. He's exactly the same.
I think he has.
No, he hasn't.
There's an element, but as he says, he probably found himself long before, which is fair. We'll get Tommy Rooney's reaction to that as a chat with Owen as well. But before we do, 6 minutes past 8 on this morning's OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Braeburn Coffee is coming to an Apple Green near you. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month, so visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn Coffee experience. After these ads, it is Tommy Rooney's Power Rankings.
The countdown to the World Cup is on. The Koigig Pod, counting down to more moments like this.
And it is Captain Fantastic, Katie McCabe, who has scored it.
Off the Ball Daily.
Home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. You had to be there. The performance rankings, a slight tangent, and the crappy quiz.
Have you ever done therapy, Adrian? Specifically related to the crappy quiz, though. I'm not interested in the rest of your life, obviously.
I would consider it, but I haven't.
That's private territory.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Some of these critics, these pundits.
Generally speaking, I'd be a fan of Off the Ball. Exactly, and like Tommy knows his football, obviously I listen to football pod the odd time.
When I was looking at the power rankings, and I thought that Jesus Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.
They just miss you like you know you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
8 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning OTB AM. It is Tommy Rooney's Power Rankings. Tommy Rooney, come in.
Morning Shane, morning Johnny.
Have you wiped away your tears listening to Owen Sheehan live there for the first time since he's left us? I mean, it was quite emotional for us. How did you feel about it?
No tears, no emotion, but there's no surprise that his first appearance of the year came after that Tyrone performance on Saturday. The heat is on. A couple of people are in touch after Monaghan's fantastic win on penalties against Armagh, saying that they'd made a mockery of the power rankings. That was just untrue. You made a mistake there at the start, Shane. You declared them as my power rankings, Tommy Rooney's power rankings. They are in fact the official, the only real Gaelic football power rankings. Ooh. There's no ownership of them. They just are what they are. It is what it is.
Okay. Yeah, because I know you've been getting a lot of hate, and look, Owen had to deal with that hate for a long time.
I wouldn't say it's hate.
No, not hate. Disagreement, potential. People are very
blind bias.
Yeah,
blind bias.
People are very protective of their counties. I think is something you'd have been aware of before, but I think you'll be more aware of now.
Look, aware of Meath. 17th.
Okay, yeah.
It is what it is.
He's very defiant there. He's like listening to Owen Sheehan has just turned him into like a fairly belligerent, abrasive Tommy Rooney.
That's what happens when you take the power rankings over. I think the personality change happens slowly, but then it clicks into gear.
Like a dictator, like starts off kind of well and just becomes a...
Well, look at...
There we go.
Who produced the power rankings for 5 years before I presented them?
Oh, there we go. Who was it? Tommy, was it?
It was Tommy.
Oh, it was Tommy.
Tommy's been the shepherd behind all of this. So like he's been the one whispering in Owen's ear to say this. Do you know? So technically, it's been Tommy Rooney's power rankings for quite some time. We just didn't know.
No.
We didn't know it.
No. It's the official Gaelic football power rankings.
The official Gaelic football power rankings. We'll get into it, Tommy. The first 2 pages, I mean, we can probably rifle through them. I don't even know if we need to, but unchanged, obviously.
As you were, yeah. The one of note, again, once more, is Meath in 17th, Down in 16th. I think on form, maybe they deserve to be a little higher, just on reflection. A couple of counties there that finished off the end of the round robin series obviously had difficult years, but they're 2 different competitions, and I think whoever wins the Tailteann Cup will end up being the 16th best team in the country, and that's just where it's going to be at. Down ahead of it at this stage. Moving on, and our movement, Monaghan last week held on to the 9th position, but Cork have slid back to 9th this week. They were unlucky at the weekend. I do think Cork are rising. I think they're coming. And I think 9th is a fair reflection of where they finished. They finished middle of the road in Division 2. They lost to Clare and Munster. And then the work that Kevin Walsh and John Cleary had started last year, the work that Kevin Walsh has brought since he came to the board this year, started to come to fruition. I'll give you a good stat from the weekend. It came from the Irish Examiner. 33 shots Cork took at the weekend. 33 attacks, 22 shots, 9 scores.
Not good enough.
Fairly paltry. Not a good return. They had no real left-footed shooter. James O'Donoghue said at the weekend, and it's James O'Donoghue's Cork. Whatever you say about Tommy Rooney's power rankings, it's James O'Donoghue's Cork. If they had a kit hug, he reckons they would have beaten Derry at the weekend. So now, look at Shane McGuigan missed that penalty. He had a poor day in front of the posts. Conor Doherty scored that brilliant goal and then kind of went a bit loose with the shooting afterwards as well. So Derry left a lot behind them too. But look at Cork have got the athleticism, and they're on the rise. I think 9th is a fair summation of where they're at.
I'm basing Tommy a bit on the game, on just the weekend games, but like I think Kerry are going to open up Derry handy enough.
I think what we saw with Derry, look, after the weekend, it's probably a fair thing to say, Johnny, but I just think that Derry are going to cause Kerry a lot more issues than Tyrone did. Tyrone wilted at the weekend, and there has been backbone issue in Tyrone. There probably has been the consistency hasn't been there in Tyrone, and people are saying Kerry out Tyrone them. Kerry set the terms of engagement on Saturday. They were the aggressors. Paddy, Clifford and Myler, Myler gave Paddy as good as he got and they both sent off at the end, but Paddy won that battle this time. The last time Myler shaded an epic battle, Paddy had a really big influence throughout the game. But Myler in extra time obviously had a couple of big plays as well, and Myler won that day. They won the All-Ireland. Kerry were the aggressors the last day. Darren McCurry really didn't get on it. The two Canavans had 2 moments apiece, really, the 2 great scores apiece, but they couldn't get into the game. Kilpatrick and Kennedy had awesome years. They were bullied by O'Connor and Barry. Adrian Spillane had a big game. Kerry did the bullying that day, and I don't think Derry will wilt as much. I also am sure Derry have the panel still to get past a team like Kerry in the form that they showed us the last day. So I think it's going to be a lot tighter. I think defensively they'll probably cause Kerry some issues, but Mark O'Shea said to us a good while ago on the football pod, he said he's always worried about a player who has an off day when he's marking them the next day, because great players don't have bad days twice. And I'm not saying David Clifford had a bad day because he had that remarkable moment, but he was 1 from 9 from his shots from play in Croke Park last Saturday. So I'd be expecting Shane McGuigan, there'll be a lot of pressure on, and David Clifford. They both have good games the next day. Yeah,
you'd imagine so. And
if Clifford has a good game, Kerry probably
it's hard to see Kerry doing it. And the point about Derry's strength and depth or lack thereof compared to teams like Kerry and Dublin is probably a fair one. They've been excellent this year. Again, Derry to retain an Ulster title is not an easy thing to do, but as John Cleary, the Cork manager, said after the game at the weekend, Cork's middle 8 is quite getting on in years, and it just kind of suited Derry, and the game petered out maybe you even just saw the Rooney Maguire goal just before the Doherty goal. I mean, Cork score the goal, all of a sudden they're back in the game, but then they kind of not lose the heads, but didn't exactly get back in position and let Derry in for that goal. I felt very, very easily, maybe.
Yeah, and we kind of saw that on a couple of occasions at the weekend. Like we saw, and I think, do you know what could have played a factor there? It could have been the week on week, the 3 games in a row that some of the preliminary winners have played, like when they didn't top their group, and we've learned that, and it's a new calendar this year. And we definitely didn't see Cork apply the same press that they did to squeeze Roscommon or to beat Mayo, so they were definitely lacking energy. But like we saw it a couple times the weekend. Like it was funny, Eoin Fitzmaurice in the Dublin Mayo game, he's raving about Mayo kicking the ball, and 45 seconds later he's like, look what happens when you kick the ball. And as he's saying it, Davy Byrne throws his left boot at that ball and it drops into Collie Beskel's hands. Rian O'Neill kicks that wonder score and Croke Park goes nuts. I actually think Ethan Rafferty nailing them with that kind of punch to the chest showed that maybe Armagh switched off for a few seconds, and they allowed Monaghan to get that one last chance, and somehow it was criminal how Conor McManus was allowed to save the ball. Like, this is intercounty football. This is the All-Ireland quarter-final. Like, it's not nice to say it, but like, Conor McManus should have been kept out of the game. Like, there's no way Manzi should have got his hands on the ball there. There was no hope in hell that the Dublin team of 2017 would have allowed that kick out to get out. Like, do you remember the scene where Mayo had brought it back to a point and David Clark has the ball and they're trying, or Dublin had just taken the lead to go point up. David Clark puts the ball in the tee and 4 Dublin players dragged down 4 Mayo players. There could have been more, but that's all we could see on TV. Actually, the referee didn't know who to black card. He didn't know who to book. It was pure chaos. And Clark's kick out, I think, goes over the sideline. And like, we saw it at the weekend. Cork scored that goal. 54 seconds later, Conor Doherty steps inside, dummies, bang, back of the net. For 54 seconds, Cork had a chance. Gone. Armagh were in the All-Ireland semi-finals again. For 20 seconds, they couldn't stop an attack. Monaghan got it. And Mayo, on top, in great form, Dublin killed them 20 seconds later. So I think what we saw there was the culmination of the fact that some teams that are at this stage aren't the finished package yet, because that's just not good enough at junior club level, never matter senior intercounty level, to concede a score like that immediately after going on the front foot. You
need ruthlessness, you need dark arts, and no, I guess we can't accuse Armagh of not engaging in the dark arts over the last number of years. But yeah, those little moments of being ice cool in the head, like Conor McManus was, or like Monaghan generally were in the last play, Armagh maybe need a little bit of that, and we've seen that they haven't got to a semi-final in so long.
I think Armagh in the clutch moments too, Shane, have been unbelievable. Like, look at Rian O'Neill. Like, talk about a clutch
last
player.
Year against Galway,
the free against Galway, like the point from play. I like that was. Do you remember Ciaran O'Connor's equaliser in the 16 final where Aidan kind of slips it to him and he's 50 yards out and he steps one way and he steps the other way and he puts it just about over the bar. Like, Rian's point was absolutely awesome, but like McManus, like, I don't think Armagh's problem is in the clutch moment. I think Armagh's problem was early on in the game. They didn't bury Monaghan. They had their chances early on. They didn't take them. They kept the game as a score for score game. They didn't put the foot in the throat. Armagh played a little bit of fear, and it's hard to blame them. They've come so close. The lines are so fine, but they allowed Monaghan to set the terms of engagement, just like Roscommon did against Mayo and Connacht a couple of months ago. They allowed Monaghan to set the terms of engagement, and once they did that, they were in bother.
Well, Tommy, you've brought up Monaghan. I have to say I'm extremely nervous because infamously, in an 8-horse race with only 8 teams left in the All-Ireland Championship, Monaghan were 9th in last week's power rankings. Sorry, I'm nervous because I haven't looked at it. I know that there are only four teams left at this stage of the championship.
Well, where do you want Monaghan to be?
So you've drawn against Armagh, who I think are probably lucky to be in the position that they're in. You've drawn against Armagh, who are probably the better team over the.
But Galway drew with Armagh last year in the quarterfinal, and
Galway were much the better team. Galway's position in the power rankings is far more of an indictment of the power rankings than Monaghan's. Let's be honest.
well, let's look. Do you want to get it? Sorry, go on, Tom. We won't go the final pitch.
Don't go there yet, Johnny. That's probably a fair point. That's a fair point from Johnny. Before we get there, so it sounds to me like you've seen the power rankings. Shane, I want to know where you think Monaghan should be. Bear in mind, as Johnny said, Vinnie Corey said at the weekend, we didn't win that match. We won a penalty shootout.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you do whatever it takes to get over the line in an All-Ireland quarter-final. And by the way, penalties are a skill as well. I made this point yesterday.
It's nothing to do with the power rankings. Like
it's nothing to do with that.
They were inferior against Armagh over the course of the game, and you think they should be in the top 4.
I think if the top 4 this year at this current state, I think if Monaghan qualify for an All-Ireland quarter-final and they're 9th in the power rankings, and then if they qualify for a semi-final and they're not in the top 4, you're asking me where I think they should be. That answers your question.
Okay,
then I think it makes a mockery.
One question for you. 2020, where would you have put Tip and Cavan in the power rankings?
Exactly.
Well, you see, that was different because let me explain. So that was a COVID year. There was you went straight from the provincial straight through to the semi-final. Monaghan this year have had a chance to play other teams in different groups. They drew with Derry in their group in Derry with 14 men for a large portion of that game. They beat Clare with 123 scoreline and did really well. They beat Kildare. They beat Kildare away from home, and again that a lot of people were writing them off. Neutral venue, but Kildare got to choose that venue, and then they got past Armagh in All-Ireland quarter-final by hook or by crook, by experience, by Carl O'Connell, Conor McCarthy, all these lads who are guaranteed All-Stars in my book. So it's totally different to Tip and Cavan in 2020 in my view. They've had more games, they've had more opportunities to show.
I didn't ask you to.
They beat Tyrone and Omagh as well.
I asked you where do you think Cavan and Tip should have been in 2020?
Well, that year, not in the top 4. Not in the top 4 probably in my view. I don't think getting to the semi-finals guarantees a top 4 in the power rankings, but the nature of the year as a whole, I think, and Monaghan's year as a whole this year has been
unbelievable.
Pretty good.
They've been an unbelievable clutch team, 100%, and they've been absolutely remarkable. And I actually feel I've been too soft where I put them now.
Okay, well, we're about to get into it. They're 5th. Yeah, show us the top.
And I actually think
this is absolute madness. Like,
I've been soft here. I actually feel like I've messed up. Yeah, Monaghan are 5th.
Do you know what? Just put up the screen again there, lads. Sorry, Galway are like this. Okay, it's not an exact science, but Galway. Where do you expect them to be? 5th? They're lucky to be in the top 8. Galway are behind Derry, Monaghan and Armagh, even though they're better than all 3, and probably Mayo as well. But then again, we haven't had a great year.
Yeah, Johnny, look, I think Pork Joyce would say it himself.
Yeah, he did.
You know, like that's really, and you're looking at that, and you're looking at Galway, and you're looking at Armagh. I couldn't put Monaghan behind Armagh.
Do you actually think Monaghan should be in the top 4 here? Like, Monaghan are pound for pound lucky to be in the top 6 or 7.
They've qualified for another All-Ireland.
They drew against Armagh, who are nowhere near. They're not asses roar of All-Ireland challengers. Like.
They got past. How can you not be an All-Ireland challenger when you're in the last?
Armagh wouldn't wipe the floor with Kerry or Dublin at the moment. They would not wipe the floor with them. They're nowhere near them.
Armagh beat Galway the week before. Monaghan drew with them and beat them on penalties.
Yeah, that was a mess of a game. Galway didn't play well. Armagh are not All-Ireland contenders. Like, and Monaghan.
Armagh wouldn't be in the top 4 if they'd won on penalties at the weekend.
Exactly.
If Armagh had beaten Monaghan by 7 or 8 points, Armagh would be in the top 4. But like this is the way it falls, Shane. Like, topping the group is so important, and it's shown what the makeup of this has been. Galway and Mayo messed up on the last day of the year. If Galway had held on against Armagh, if Aidan O'Shea had even put that ball over the bar against Cork and they ended up second in the group, I think we'd be looking at a very different All-Ireland semi-final at the minute. Like, I think Kerry could have been in a little bit of bother if they'd finished second and had to play a preliminary round quarter-final. But Kerry have their rhythm now. They had their 2-week break. They now have 2 weeks to the semi-final. They're after putting in that savage performance against Tyrone. Kerry couldn't be in a better place. And the Dubs, like, I think the real debate here is whether Dublin should be number 1. And that's the thing I really struggled with this week. Should Dublin be number 1? Because that second half performance was frightening. As a Meath person, I nearly cried, like. It was just, they're bloody back, and they had not shown anything like that since, I would argue, 2019. None of it in 2020, none of it in 21. Not even against Kerry. Like, when they put up that challenge against Kerry, it felt like one last sting of a dying wasp. Yeah. Well, Jesus Christ, the giant was back.
It's desperately hard to call which is the best team.
But in Tommy's defence, you had Kerry at number 1, and you know, if you'd moved Kerry down to number 2 after them beating Tyrone in the manner in which they did, it would have been a farce as well. So
I'm not sure it would have been a farce, Shane. Like, I can't really control what happens with the power rankings. They just kind of come to me, you know.
It happens.
And like, you know, Monaghan being where they're at, like, there's obviously a streak in Galway where they haven't got over the line. They've won their provincials, grand. They finished second in the league, fine. But like, it was in Galway's hands this year, and they had done so much right, and they had been in first place in the power rankings, and they just threw it away. And it's the same thing with Armagh. Armagh have been 3 penalty shootouts away from winning the Ulster title and being in 2 back-to-back All-Ireland semi-finals. It's such fine lines, but that is sport. It's Gaelic football. It's top-level elite sport. That's why we love it. It's going to be so worth it for whoever does it, because the margins are that tight. And Monaghan being in 5th place, fully deserved. They're in an All-Ireland minor final this weekend against Derry. Vinnie Corey, like, what an exceptional job he's done. Even the manner in which he's used this panel this year. Like, I was looking at the Monaghan team sheet at the weekend. Like, was there only 3 recognised proper out-and-out forwards starting in Jack McCarron, Stevie O'Hanlon, Conor McCarthy at wing back? Like, Gary Mohan, I'd argue, is a bloody middle third player. He's nearly taken on the mantle of being a sow, like Darren Hughes has done for so many years. A sow of a man. And, like, I'm looking at the rest of the team there. You've got McCarron obviously in the corner. You've got O'Hanlon at 10. Micheál Bannigan is another forward. So really, they started with 3 forwards and McCarthy then at wing back. So, like, 4 out and out forwards. McManus, how they've used them, comes off the bench, kicks his 4 points. They've protected him all year long. They've used him exceptionally well. Like, what a job he's done. But, like, Monaghan won that game at the weekend with a 46%, I think, conversion rate.
Yeah, the wide count was a concern, and that's why I thought it was going to go south for Monaghan at one point.
How many All-Stars did you give out? Because it doesn't work like that.
I know, of course, yeah, and I think getting to a semi-final maybe only guarantees you possibly 2, maybe 3 if you're doing very well. So if it's
doesn't guarantee anything.
It doesn't guarantee it. Conor McCarthy's one, I think, is guaranteed based on all of his performances this year. It's been consistency. 1-2 from wing back against Clare, 1-2 from wing back against Kildare as well, and then 3 points at the weekend. Like, he's clutch, and these scores are outrageous as well.
2-12 from play in the championship this year. I think he's in the top 6 or 7 scorers from playing the championship. McCarthy's been a revelation, and I 100% will back it. If McCarthy puts in a good performance next time against Dublin, 100% he's right in the mix. But, like, there is absolutely no guarantees at this stage of the competition, especially when we've had so many matches this year. I think it's going to be even out a bit more. I might give McCarthy a better shout.
Tommy, does the league become a bit of an irrelevance now? Like, when you look at Galway and Mayo this year, is like, what was the point in any of this? Like, I mean, fair enough, you can still, like, go through the back door, but also just win your province or come second in your province, and then the league, it might be this thing for teams that are kind of looking for a league position to get into that section of the tournament. But, like, what was the point in any of this when like Dublin were sort of going through the motions in Division 2 and Kerry were, like, bang average up until essentially that Kerry were going through the motions until last weekend? You're like, this is just a phony war up until now for Dublin and Kerry, who are suddenly just look miles better than everyone else, even though they haven't all year.
Yeah, there was an element to that. And what was the phrase you used there? That they was, you didn't use shadowboxing, you used something else there.
Phony war.
Yeah, like, there's, like, I'd love to know the sports scientists behind this all, because they've obviously timed it to absolute perfection. When you look at Mayo's strong start to the league, right, and McStay was obviously in with his management team. They'd lost Mullen and Keegan. They draw to Galway. They draw to Armagh. I think they put in another 2 good wins. I think they win down in Kerry the next day or something like that. And a lot of people are looking now saying, like, why didn't he mix it up a little bit more, or change up the panel, or, you know, mix up who he was going with. Like, McStay felt like, this is important now, we'll go for the win in the league. And I think it was a big thing for Mayo to win a bit of national silverware for all the younger players and the newer players, you say, coming through. Galway kind of ended up there by default. Like, the Rossies were in a really good position for a long time. Derry and Dublin couldn't help it, they were in Division 2, but, you know, they were able to time their run to a certain extent. I would say that it probably is, like, the league has been important at different times. Like, we've, over the years, like, Derry were a great league team and couldn't switch it on in championship back around 12, 13, 14. There's been different times where different league titles have been important. I think Kerry won one in 17, and that felt massive for that Kerry team. They bet Dublin in the final. Dean Rock missed a late free, hit the post, and I think it was the first match Brian Fenton had ever lost, actually, as a Dublin footballer. Mayo winning one in 19 felt like a big thing for that team. There's different years where the league means more, and I think next year the league is going to mean less than it ever has done, because teams are going to look at this year and go, what can we learn from last year? I don't think the provincials will matter as much. I think just getting a good,
we have to A, get into the groups, and then B, try to win the group. Basically, that's
exactly. That's it. Win the group. That's the key, because to get your 2 week, that's the run you want to the All-Ireland. And I think that's totally fair, Johnny. I think teams are going to treat it slightly differently next year. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a bad thing. I think we're going to be mad for football when it comes back in February. I think eventually there might be a tweak to this system where we'll get an exciting provincial championship played in February, March, the league kicking off then, and then we're into a round robin after that.
A fine one for me, sorry, I know we're running out of time, but just Martin Breheny, and I like the way the Indo does this, a tease-up article is taking place the next day. So Martin Breheny says, it's a very interesting headline. It's like, why would you bring a neutral to watch a game of Gaelic football? Right, so is this just an old man kind of shouting at clouds who's seen football for years and years and years from my neck of the woods, and he's just got pissed off with the way the game has gone? Or do you look at those games, even Monaghan and Armagh for me, like, if you really think that's a crap game, I don't think you understand how good Gaelic football has become in another way.
Yeah. Well, I put it to you this way. I was in a cable car going from one side of Porto to another, and there was an Iranian couple in it with me, and obviously I was watching the Monaghan Armagh game. It was at the end of the game, and it was that moment where Rian O'Neill and Manzi swapped those points, and McGeaney came on, or maybe it was at the end, it was a shoulder, it was a Mohan nail turban.
Yeah.
And he leant over and he goes, "My God, what are you watching?" I was like, "It's Gaelic football." I'll tell you one thing, he was Googling Gaelic football after he got off that cable car. He wanted to see what was going on after that. So look, football isn't perfect. There isn't a hope in hell is perfect at the minute, but some teams showed us how it should be played at the weekend. There was nearly 2 different sports at the weekend. Like, would you not bring a neutral to watch David Clifford? Like,
you absolutely would.
You know,
and look,
I think there's things that can be fixed about the game, but like, when GAA Gold came on during the pandemic and we got to see all those old games, like,
a lot of them were shite.
A lot of them were absolutely.
You're nostalgic for it. It's like the old boys who said communism was better. It actually wasn't.
You can't have all good games though.
Can't always be good games. I think the game can improve, but like physically, athletically, skill level, they're as good as it's probably ever been.
100%.
And a couple of little tweaks needed. But yeah, I think the big debate here should have been around Dublin Tyrone, Dublin Kerry. Like, the Dubs were obviously absolutely frightening at the weekend, but I just think the manner in which Kerry won, the aggression they brought to their table, the anger they played with, just kept them in the first place. And I think it's if Kerry can double down with that against Derry, and it's going to be very difficult. Derry are going to put in a really good performance. If Kerry can double down, and if Dublin can just about get by the clutch kings Monaghan, who, don't forget, have already relegated them last year, and stayed up this year and have won so many games, put so many games in the fire. If Dublin can just get past Monaghan, we could be set up for an absolute epic All-Ireland final.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe it's going to be a unique one, and one of Monaghan and Derry are going to get there as well.
You never know. It's backroom teams as well. Paddy Talley's influence on that Kerry team has probably helped keep them to number one, and also people mightn't have known this before, but that Monaghan circle of players and backroom team on the pitch at Croke Park after the match, some people would have seen Pádraig Duffy, the former Director General of the GAA, who is I think it's logistics. He's head of logistics. He's certainly helping out, and he's been involved in Monaghan teams and stuff.
I'm not surprised, Shane, and I know you're on the payroll as well. So there's only about how many people eligible to help Monaghan at this stage, like the size of the amount of clubs, the size of the population. It is an unbelievable story, and they're one of my favourite teams. Genuinely, like, they are unbelievable, but they can't be higher than 5th at the moment.
Absolutely.
Maybe if they win the All-Ireland minor title, they'll jump in the 4th.
Well, possibly.
Can I give a mention to a bit of news we got coming up later today?
Yeah.
The Football Pod have a roadshow coming up the Thursday night before the All-Ireland final, and it is going to be in the perfect venue, Croke Park. We're going to be in the Hogan Stand Suite the Thursday night before the All-Ireland final. Paddy Andrews, James O'Donoghue, and special guests. It is going to be absolutely class. Tickets go on sale later today. They're going to be limited availability, so make sure you get a hold of them when you can. And yeah,
brilliant stuff. That'll be a class one, Tommy. For the podcast listeners, Cork are down 1 to 9th, Tyrone down 3 to 8th, Galway staying 7th, Armagh 6th, Monaghan up 4 to 5th place in the power rankings, despite it being a 4-horse race. Mayo down 1 to 4th, Derry up 1 to 3rd, and then, as Tommy said, Dublin 2nd, and Kerry still the kingpins in 1st. Tommy, great stuff.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Johnny.
Brilliant stuff. Tommy Rooney's latest power rankings.
Tommy knows his football, obviously. Listen to Football Pod the odd time. And I was looking at the power rankings and I thought that Jesus, Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.
Thing just makes me laugh after each one. 8:33 AM on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM with myself and Johnny, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Delighted to have Jenny Claffey and Colin Buhig join us back in studio. Jenny, how are things?
Hey Shane, how's it going?
Keeping well. You've been busy at the European Championships. Is that what we're calling it?
European Games.
European Games. Sorry, of course. The paddle.
I made the mistake too.
Representing your country again. This is massive.
Yeah, some honour. Absolutely amazing experience there last week in Krakow at the European Games, playing paddle. Just, oh my God, I'm looking back at it going, that was a dream. Getting to walk out wearing Ireland across your chest is such an honour every time you get the chance, and to do it with a different sport is pretty cool as well.
Doubles? You were playing doubles, or was it singles as well?
Yeah, so paddle is only played as doubles.
Okay,
so my partner was Susan McCran, so she was the one who roped me into paddle, and I thank her for that now.
The fitness levels, how does it compare to tennis? Obviously it's less ground to cover, but I assume you need the reflexes and still a pretty decent base level of fitness.
Yeah, I was surprised actually when I started playing paddle how physical it actually is. Like, compared to tennis is such a bigger court, and obviously you've got more ground to cover, but it's a lot of like stop, start, forward, back, like squash, kind of, because it's a mixture of squash and tennis. So you're going back and forth a lot, and it's about getting into the net. So and then you're either trying to get to that or else they're lobbing you. So you're going back and forward the whole time, and there's no break. So in tennis, like, you can kind of take your time walking over to get a ball. There's no the cage. You're enclosed in a cage, so you don't really get much downtime. But it didn't take too long to get used to, because I have that baseline of fitness from tennis.
What's easier to learn, tennis or paddle?
Paddle, I think. Coming from a tennis background, is a little bit difficult to adjust to paddle, because obviously I'm coming in trying to whack the ball, and that doesn't actually stand to you in paddle, because if you hit the ball with power, it bounces back up off the wall and it gives the opponent a chance then to dictate again. But learning the paddle shots is probably a little bit more straightforward compared to tennis, whereas there's also no serve in paddle, so that alleviates a huge problem, because the serve in tennis is the most difficult shot to learn.
How did the ball come into play in paddle?
You serve underarm. So underarm, and you're always trying to get into the net and control the point from the net. And you think, here comes, like, they lob you a lot, so you think, here comes a lob, we'll just smash this. And if I use my tennis smash, as I said, unless you hit it hard enough and it bounces, hits the back wall, it can come all the way back over to your side where they can't get a play on it. Right. But if you don't hit it correctly, it'll bounce, and then they then have a high ball on their side, which they can then put away.
Very tactical.
And it's a lot of slice, so you use a lot of slice. There's no topspin at all, really. Well, there's a little bit, but it's not really played with topspin. So flat and slice is the way you want the ball.
Give us an impression of doing a slice hit there.
A little. Yeah. There's a shot called like this bandeja. So it's like, where you come up to like shoulder height and you like slice, come around. They say it's like throwing like a, when you're skimming a stone. Skimming a stone across the ball. So there's no actual like wrist movement on it. It's just using your body.
That was the official social media imagery of you. Actually, it was like the swish of the ball.
Yeah,
and the throw.
Like Mohammed bin Salman over there.
You're doing it like.
It's like handball. It's almost like you're shaping your arm like you're playing handball.
It feels like you're almost pushing more with your body. Then
you brought us in a tennis racket. Can you bring us in a paddle?
I've only just got one there not that long ago.
only have the one.
Yeah, the one, and they're not cheap. My gosh,
What are we talking?
They're more expensive than tennis rackets. Like, the racket I have, I think, is about 350 quid, and it looks like basically a beach bat.
Yeah.
Okay, forgive me for saying that, but it does, like, it's really thick, but it's like, it looks kind of like shaped like a.
I think this is the game that Adrian Barry wanted.
It wasn't it?
Wanted us to play. And I think he's reached out to a few places to see if they'll give us a game.
Yeah, so I was actually chatting with the president of the Padel Federation, Naomi. She's been really great in my development with paddle. She was offering us to go up and have a game in Bushy Park, so we must take her up on that.
So, like, where can you play this in Ireland apart from Bushy Park?
So at the moment there's only 25 courts around Ireland. So Bushy Park is the main kind of place. Fitzwilliam Tennis Club, they have 3 paddle courts. Rockbrook School in North Farnham, there's one in Bective. They're kind of spread around. It's mainly in Leinster, but by the end of this year they're going to have 50. So it's kind of, obviously it's growing quickly, just not quickly enough for
I've never heard of it. Yeah.
You're not
first time hearing it.
The only one. A few of the like even the Irish athletes last week when we were travelling to Krakow, they were like, what's paddle? Is that in the water? So we were like having to explain.
You were with the boxers.
We went to diving. It was meant to be boxing, but we actually travelled with the divers. And some of the canoeists and kayakers. So even they were asking us. I was like, lads, you're in the water, you should know.
Yeah.
If it's with a paddle.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were having to whip out the rackets and show them what it was and how it's played. So the European Games was just a really great opportunity for us to showcase paddle, in Europe, as well as hopefully, it's trickled down here into Ireland, so more people are going to get involved. But it's the fastest growing sport in the world at the moment.
Wow.
Onto Wimbledon, that Sophia Kenin and Coco Gauff had no business being a first round match. That's the quality of that. That should be a second week game, at least fourth round. You're talking about a Grand Slam champion against a Grand Slam finalist. what a match.
It's tough, yeah, because I mean, you know, looking ahead to Wimbledon, you would have thought Goff could have been maybe an outside favourite, you know, because her game kind of would suit the grass, and she was in the top half with Swiatek, so the bottom half is quite stacked in the women's side, so she kind of had a bit of a chance, you might have thought. And then when she came up against Kenin, that was straight away, that was popcorn tennis. You knew, because Kenin is a former Grand Slam champion and a former Grand Slam finalist, so we know she has the ability. She's just had a few ropey years with injuries and whatnot.
How cruel is that? Like, you can say it better than anyone, that the cruelty of professional tennis is like, she was a 2020 French Open finalist, like you said, and she had to go through qualifying at the French Open this year and didn't get through qualifying.
Yeah,
there's no sentimentality at all in tennis.
No, but like, you know, you hear look at the draw, like that was unfortunate for Goff that she came up against Kenin. But I actually think that the qualifying stood to Kenin, because she'd come in, she's played 3 matches, you know, she's gotten used to the surroundings, she's played on grass, she has come in then with a bit of confidence, whereas Goff, you know, coming out on a main court, and it's you know, there's always going to be nerves and the expectation and pressures. Like, it takes you almost a first set to get used to that, whereas Kenin has had 3 matches under her belt and will come in with confidence, and she looked every bit confident yesterday coming up against Goff. She was feisty, she was ready for the fight, and it was a great game. It was a really, really close game. I think that was probably that was the best match in Wimbledon yesterday.
Yeah, what's the final score? I have it in front of me here: 6-4, 2-6, 6-4. Like, and Kenin's had the injury issues as well. She's had upheavals in her coaching team, so like dealing with all that sort of crack is just, and to be able to, I guess, put that to one side and focus on a major is so important. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's trials and tribulations, I guess, of being a professional athlete. You have to deal with the off track or off court issues. Yeah, she had her dad was her coach, and then they had a breakup, and then he came back, and then all that kind of stuff's kind of weigh heavily on her. But she's a fantastic tennis player. It's just, we say this about a lot of the women's side as well, but can they carry through the form? You'd like to see, after beating a big name of Goff yesterday, that she can carry on now and you know, push on and do well in the tournament. How
do you think the state of women's tennis is at the moment?
It's looking healthy, definitely healthier than it was there for the last few years. Since Ash Barty retired last year, she was kind of the top of the game, and we were thinking she was going to emerge as being the top for a while, and then she kind of had that shock retirement. I think we're talking about the top 3, Swiatek, Sabalenka and Rybakina, as being the next big
serious players, like all 3 of them.
Unbelievable, yeah. Can they, you know, do what the men did and push each other on for the next number of years, and can we see some amazing records be made in the women's side? Hopefully. But there are other names like Jabeur, Mukova, if we're talking about Kenin, Goff, there's loads of players who will be pushing those players on as well. I mean, it's hard to call, will we see Swiatek dominating for the next 10 years? You know, but it definitely looks healthier that we have some rivals at the top of the women's game.
Yeah, it's so much better than the men's game, because there's one and the rest still in the men's game, whereas the women's, like you've just named, like more than half a dozen players who could all win Wimbledon. The other side of it too is all of those players you mentioned could walk down the street and might not be recognised. Is that a bad thing necessarily?
It is a bad thing, isn't it?
For the game, yeah, I think, but maybe for them, no, because you know, you don't want that.
Have your life, like,
yeah, you can have that bit of privacy. But yeah, I mean, we come on, we do know who Swiatek. If she walked into him, you'd recognise her.
I wouldn't recognise her.
Really?
No.
I think a lot of people wouldn't. I really do.
Maybe tennis fans.
No, of course, but I'm talking about like a sports fan.
When horse racing is like that as well. It's like, you know, if Ryan Moore walked in here today, who's like the biggest, I'm going to Roscommon to see Ryan Moore, people wouldn't know who he is. Like, tennis is peripheral as well.
Take something like same in Formula 1, Drive to Survive, increase the awareness of people around certain drivers, and like it's kind of the same for different sports like that sometimes you need, well, maybe it hasn't worked in tennis.
No,
I guess
point definitely hasn't worked for,
like, that was part of the plan, to make some of these kind of middle tier players more recognisable, but I don't know if it's worked to the same degree.
I don't think it has. We were talking about that a little bit, like how they haven't, well, you know, we want to see the kind of the journeyman as well as the top players, and see, like, everyone wants to see what Djokovic is doing at home, and you know, everyone wants a little insight into what's making him the best tennis player in the world. Or Swiatek, we only kind of got a snippet of her, we didn't get anything with Djokovic and Nadal.
Swiatek obviously winning in straight sets yesterday, but she's never got beyond the 4th round of Wimbledon. Like, grass tends to be maybe not her strength. I even listened in interviews to her, she wants to become more of an all-court type player. Do you think she deserves to be among the favourites for Wimbledon? I guess her grass form hasn't led people to accept that she should be one of the favourites, but then it's Swiatek, so why not?
Yeah, I think she's certainly mastered clay court, as we know, 3-time French Open Grand Slam winner. Then she's also mastered the hard court. She's done very well there last year in the US Open. It's the grass season is so short, like it's only maybe 4 weeks, so they don't get a huge amount to play on the grass. So it's not really surprising that not that many players are brilliant on grass. Like we look at Djokovic, obviously, because he's been playing on grass for so many years in Wimbledon, but Swiatek is like, I think this last year was her third season, or not even third season playing on grass, although she did win Junior Wimbledon in 2018. So that's her
talent overrided her lack of experience, but you hear that so often, the lack of experience on grass courts. Like, I think Novak Djokovic's first match on grass was when he was 17. He just didn't grow up around
first match.
And it's hard because back in the 70s and 80s, 3 of the floor slams were on grass at the Australian Open and the US Open, and they changed the surface, and now it's the total other way around. And I think grass is the only surface that doesn't have a Masters 1000 event, so it is seen as completely specialised. So you see all these really talented players exit so early on in Wimbledon, so it makes it really unpredictable.
It definitely does because of that, because like Roland Garros finished 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, they only have 3 weeks to prepare on grass. There's I think there's 2 tournaments normally that they either play, generally only play one or 2 to get the warm-up event, to get time on grass, and a lot of them don't expect to win those tournaments. It's more just getting their feet on the grass and getting used to it. The game is played so differently compared to clay court. Like on clay you have much more time, the rallies are longer. The grass court, like, it's so quick, the surface is so quick, you have to adjust your footwork, you got to get used to the not being able to slide, well, although some players can slide on grass. Like, it's a completely different game altogether. It's so fast, like you're playing up closer to the baseline, the points are shorter, you have to hit more with more power, whereas on clay you get away with more spin. So that's where you look at Swiatek. She's so dominant on clay because her game suits clay. She has a really big wind up on her forehand and she creates loads of topspin on that. Her backhand's very, very good on as well on a clay court because she can hit through that a bit more. So she wants to improve her grass court tennis, even though it's only for 4 weeks of the year. She's got to try and adjust her game. Like, she needs to flatten out her shots more, she needs to shorten up that take back on her forehand, and she has the footwork. Like, she's an amazing athlete on the court and moves really, really well, so that is one of her strengths. But I think she just needs to sharpen up those aspects of her game and maybe introduce a bit more slice and whatnot.
Grass is the trickiest surface, generally speaking,
to adjust to, I think, especially after coming from the clay. And as we mentioned, they don't get that much time on it, but it's a little bit of a different game. It's just so quick compared to their hard court and clay, where they have a little bit more time on the ball.
Novak Djokovic's competition.
There is none, right?
Well, I think Carlos Alcaraz won Queens and has all experience on grass.
Yeah, that was his third tournament.
But then he played Djokovic on his favourite surface, on clay, in the French Open semi-final, and in his own words, it got to him. Playing Djokovic got to him.
That was a surprise.
Yeah,
I really think that was a surprise.
He was favourite going into that match, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, and just the occasion, the nerves, the stress got to him. You find that hard to believe that happens to athletes at that level. When he is a Grand Slam winner, he has been to that stage of a tournament. He's experienced that, albeit he is only 20 and he hasn't got that much experience. But still, it was obviously the hype and the pressure created by himself and his team and the media that got him in that situation. But looking at Wimbledon for the men's side, Djokovic is the runaway favourite. Like, I don't really think there's anyone who's going to come close to him.
He seemed to get a nice reception yesterday, like reasonably nice reception.
I think it's a good point. I think he's finally getting to the place where he has a real aura about him.
His greatness is just...
And it's undeniable. And also statistically, he's going to be the greatest. I mean, if he wins this Wimbledon, he'll be level with the number of Wimbledons that Roger Federer won.
That's mad, isn't it?
And if he wins this competition, he'll also have the most number of Grand Slams ever won, joint with Margaret Court.
Yeah.
He's favourite to win the US Open. He could finish the year with the calendar slam, winning all 4 slams in 1 year, and that will make him the greatest player ever.
Is he likeable though?
But is he? And the thing with Djokovic is, out of the big 3 between Rafael Nadal, Federer, and himself, he so wants to be loved. More than the other 2 ever did, but the problem is he's by far the least loved.
Then, I mean, like, he's controversial.
I know, but the jab is just one thing as well. I mean, he also set up a players' union with Pospisil, the Canadian player, which is very admirable, but it excluded women, which is another thing that he does like. But he doesn't think of the bigger PR picture for a guy who is obsessed with his image. He's very reactionary and instinctive, and there's probably it's probably hard to warm to him at times. I actually do enjoy watching his matches Because he's such a tough player to play against. It's like, who said, I think it was Casper Ruud, because he's lost 2 Grand Slam finals to him.
Yeah.
It's or one actually, sorry, the French Open recently. He said the problem with Djokovic is he has no weakness.
Yeah, he's in every single point.
The last 2 Wimbledon finals, he's lost the first set against Nick Kyrgios last year, Matteo Berrettini the year before. It doesn't matter to him. Imagine playing an opponent like that.
He is unbelievable. Like, as much as people like to hate him, you know, he is just undeniably the best tennis player at the moment, and he's really showing, like, he's crushing all of these records you're talking about there. Like, he overcame, you know, in French Open, he's now the most, he's got the most Grand Slams on the men's side. If he wins Wimbledon, 24 Grand Slams, matches Margaret Court, matches Roger Federer's 8th Wimbledon title. It's just like, he hasn't lost on centre court in 40 matches in Wimbledon. He hasn't lost.
Andy Murray defeat, was that the last time he lost on centre court?
And Andy Murray's the only player in the draw, 128 players, he's the only player in the draw who's actually beaten Djokovic on grass as well.
That's mad.
Yeah, and that was in the final 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah. That's 10 years ago.
Like,
this year. God, yeah.
I mean, he's so good. He's just so good on the surface.
It wasn't mad. Was it 4 years? 2019 final, Federer had 2 championship points against Djokovic.
Oh, sickening.
And at that point, he was ahead of. He was ahead of the other
Federer
2
to win.
Yeah, I love Federer. He was my favourite. Nothing against Djokovic, but I love Federer.
How do you compete with the Federer image? You can't touch him.
No, true.
I saw a photo of Roger Federer with Elton John yesterday. He pops up and then, like, he's singing a Coldplay concert. Like, this guy is he's unbelievable. I've spent this morning Googling how much did the Wimbledon centre court roof cost. You get different figures, like $150 million was mentioned, £75 million was mentioned. But I mean, that was a farce yesterday during the match. So, like, the roof is closed for anyone who hasn't seen what happened. Djokovic beats Argentina's Pedro Castellan 6-3, 6-3, 7-6 on centre court. But after that first set, there was no play for 80 minutes. Despite the roof being closed, Djokovic was dabbing the grass. The leaf blowers came out. He was encouraging the crowd to start blowing in from the crowd to dry it. And it was just like, for a roof that's cost so much, I think it was the humidity maybe that's caused this issue. But
this is again climate change, isn't it? It's like when it hit 40 degrees in the UK last year, the railways couldn't function because we're not built for this.
Already.
So I presume, and I'm not going on another tirade here, but I presume they're just not used to this humidity. The weather was nuts in Dublin yesterday, and I was thinking, how is this going to affect Wimbledon? Because, like, it was a blue sky about like 10 yards away, and I was getting absolutely drenched, and it was very, very humid over the last 2 weeks. So I presume they didn't actually build it with a view to the changing climate, I presume.
Well, if you spent that money on a roof, surely you can deal with humidity as well as precipitation. I don't know what.
But you don't build a roof for humidity. You build a roof to keep the rain away.
Yeah,
but you should consider the humidity. You know, when
well, Colin, you're the tennis expert.
I've never seen that happen before Wimbledon. It's unprecedented. I don't know how it did. There's 15,000 people in the crowd. Sure, Tim Henman, who's involved in the tournament, was asked about it on BBC, and he said, I'll get an answer for you. I don't know what happened.
You saw in Qatar how they had to keep the air conditioning going in winter or whatever, so they're obviously equipped for it. But Wimbledon was not built to deal with humidity in a stadium with a roof, I presume. I'm presuming here, because the climate is changing so rapidly, we just don't know what to do about it, basically.
Was that not, did they not wait till the first set was over to put the roof over, and there was a little bit of rain, so then the surface was wet then, and then they closed over the roof, and then that obviously created the core. They were saying like the grass was sweaty, so like they couldn't. That's the same effect of playing it on wet on a rainy.
Should mention Michael Moe as well, the Monaghan man. He's not a Monaghan man, he's American / I think he's a few other nationalities as well. He of course famously got to the third round of the Australian Open, beat Zverev en route in the second round, but he yesterday beat the 11th seed Felix Auger-Aliassime in four sets. So just to mention to him, his mother Geraldine was from Monaghan.
Okay.
So there is
Didn't actually know that.
There's the Irish link there. Who at this stage, before we let you go, Jenny, are you predicting for the men's and women's side of the draw?
Undeniably Djokovic on the men's side. Hopefully it'll be a Djokovic-Alcaraz good final though that we see. And then on the women's side, that's a really hard one to call. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say Swiatek, just because I want her to show that she's able on the grass. But it could be anyone. There could be Rybakina, Sabalenka. I think my outside favourite will be Kvitova. I'd love to see her win just because she's won it twice before, and she's a great grass court player. Won a tournament last week, and it'd be nice to see her, but I just can't see it being one of outside the top three. So Swiatek.
Jenny, thanks for coming in as always.
Thanks for
pleasure. Thanks for being here. 8:53 a.m. approaching on Tuesday mornings, OTB AM with myself and Johnny Ward, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Colin, it's been a very sad and tragic couple of days. We had the news of Greg Oliver's passing, the Munster rugby coach, dying in a paragliding accident in South Africa yesterday. But generally speaking, it's been a tragic couple of days, and it's kind of hit close to home here as well in Off the Ball.
Yeah, we were shocked to hear the tragic news of the passing of the former St. Michael's students Andrew Donnell and Max Wall and their post-leaving cert holiday in EOS. Max actually had transition year work experience with Off the Ball in the summer of 2021. It was during the height of COVID when many people were working from home, but that inconvenience didn't faze Max in the slightest, which was so impressive considering his tender age. Max was an extremely bright, chatty and intelligent young man with a huge interest in sport and an equally big future ahead of him. This was very clear within minutes of meeting Max. He stood out for his age in terms of his natural interest in how the industry worked and how keen he was to develop himself in both ambition and practice. But mostly, Max was a very kind and thoughtful person. The thoughts of everyone at Off the Ball are with both of their families and friends during this awful time. May they rest in peace.
Yep, absolutely. We'll send our condolences to Andrew and Max's family. That's tragic news. I think the whole country was touched by the news when it came in over the last couple of days. So just horrendous. And then the news of Greg Oliver's passing as well yesterday is just terrible thing. So obviously our thoughts, everyone at Off the Ball is with the family of Andrew and Max as well. Between now and 10 o'clock, loads more still to come on the show. We'll have John Duggan coming in with us in just a moment as well. 8:50, it's already gone beyond 8:50, so we're clearly over time. But Jonathan Wilson is going to join us very shortly. We're going to talk Mason Mount, we're going to talk Declan Rice, a few other bits beside as well. Stephen Gerrard, of course, taking that job in Saudi Arabia, as we mentioned at the top of the show. And then around 9:10, 9:15, Conleith Gilligan, the former Derry footballer, is going to join us as well to kind of reflect even further on the weekend. We'll touch maybe a little bit more. We did with Keith Higgins yesterday on talking Mayo, but we'll talk a bit more on Derry, a bit more on Monaghan as well. But we do have a clip before all that, so we'll be back with John Duggan in the studio in just a moment. We've Caitlin Thompson discussing Djokovic with Joe last night.
To what extent, what is the gap here? Because we all had high hopes for Carlos Alcaraz at the French, and he's won the warm-up tournament at Queen's, Alcaraz, but he seemed to say the occasion got to him a touch against Djokovic in the semi-final.
It was insane going into that match that Alcaraz was the favorite. Obviously, he had a meteoric rise lifting the trophy last year in New York as the US Open champion, but anybody who favored Alcaraz, even on his preferred surface of clay against Djokovic, somebody who at the time had 22 majors, is sort of insane. I have to hope that if the two of them clash again in this tournament, even though the surface obviously favors Djokovic given his track record and past performance, but I have to hope that at least some of that experience earlier this spring in Paris would have benefited Alcaraz, because not only did Alcaraz not quite play up to his potential, he also was just racked with nerves, cramping, which is what happened with him, where he kind of lost his legs there towards the end of the match, is something that often happens when nerves get the better of you and you're using up a lot of energy because of sort of stress and anxiety. So I have to hope at the very least we'll get a better performance out of him. But despite the fact that Alcaraz comes in as the number one seed, anybody saying that Novak Djokovic is not the favorite to win this and get one step closer to the calendar year slam, which, obviously he's hurtling towards after really great performances in Melbourne and Paris, is just taking crazy pills. They're trying to sell you something, because the truth is Djokovic is far and away the favorite. That's not to say he's a lock. This is a tricky surface and anything can happen, but Alcaraz, I wouldn't say if Djokovic is going to lose, it's going to be because of Alcaraz.
It is 8:57 a.m. approaching here on Tuesday morning's OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball with myself, Shane Hannon, and Johnny Ward. We have John Duggan now in the studio. Morning, John.
Shane, Johnny, how are we doing?
Keeping well. Happy 4th of July, John. Happy Independence Day.
Soccer.
What's your we were just discussing in the ad break there, American sports experiences. I'm sure we've all had. You've been to America a number of times.
I've been to gridiron, I've been to college basketball, I've been to NBA, and I've been to a few baseball games. I find baseball unbelievably boring, and it's not helped by the fact that I think they sold two beers, Bud and Bud Light, one of which was worse than the other. So it was like you've 3 or 4 hours of this to get through, and like other
beers are available, yeah.
And so anyway, basketball, I find there's just too many scores in it. I find it quite boring, but I love American football. I love going to American.
Which gridiron game were you at?
I've seen the Jets and the Giants. I think I've only been to pre-season. I don't think I've actually been to a regular game. But the Jets are playing the Giants in regular season this season. They're also playing in pre-season, so maybe I'll get to that. I haven't been to the new Giant Stadium either. I was in the old one, so the new, what do they call it now, the Meadowlands, it's actually in New Jersey,
MetLife Stadium.
The MetLife Stadium. I haven't been to that, but yeah, I love the whole experience of the day out of American football, and the breaks in play just don't bother you at all when you're there, I find.
Yeah, what about you? I haven't been to much. I was at the NFL London game. The Jaguars beat the Dolphins, but it was, you're not getting the full experience when it's in London, I guess. I tried to go last summer to a Colorado Rockies Major League Baseball game in Denver. We got to the ground. We were going to buy tickets off the touts, but then the stadium looked lovely. It was a lovely evening, but then we found a rooftop bar beside the stadium. We were like, you know what, let's maybe watch the match on TV and sit in this lovely bar. So
I also went to a hockey game, and I also watched New York versus Leitrim in the Connacht Championship, so there we go.
That counts. In the Bronx?
In the Bronx, yeah. I had a bet. I heard Jamie Clark was joining New York, and this is like a few months in advance, and New York were 5-2, so like it was actually a good bet, but it ended up being a draw. But I went out there on the premise that it was going to be paid for by Jamie Clark, which it wasn't.
Well, there you go. There's a few other bits, John. We're talking this new rugby competition as well, which it sounds like an interesting concept.
My first ever day in America was in the Yankees Stadium. My first ever day in America, went to see the Yankees
in the Bronx.
Yeah, first ever day, and had the best.
So your first day in America?
First ever day in America, went to see the Yankees.
What an experience!
Arrived into New York, got a cab, did every cliched thing. Got a cab, saw Manhattan when you appear, and just like you see the massive. Anybody's ever wants to go to New York, you just see all the skyscrapers. Went to Grand Central Station, put my bag in the hotel, and then went off to the Yankees.
What you should do in New York is just like go to a bar and just get lost for a few days. Basically, that's what happens. It's just like it's such a mad city.
I'm hoping to do that when Clare win the All Ireland in Clare.
I can see it happen, JD. Worrying.
But you've done the Kentucky Derby as well, John.
No, Breeders' Cup in
Breeders'
Kentucky.
Cup, sorry, yeah.
Breeders' Cup's amazing. Highly recommended. Real quality racing for 2 days, and obviously there's Irish involvement in it as well with Aidan O'Brien. And the other sport I went to was college football in Atlanta, but never been to the Masters, never been to an NBA, never been to NFL, and looking to hopefully put that right in the next few years.
Well, yeah, I've been to Aqueduct, Saratoga and Belmont.
Right.
And Aqueduct is very near the JFK, and it's interesting because it's kind of like the dregs of the racing, and a lot of people go there just to smoke weed and kind of like while the day away, because they're just like kind of lads that probably don't have a job, and they're just like, it has that feel of a kind of a...
Is it edgy?
It's interesting, yeah. Like they're not afraid to roar abuse at jockeys that didn't win, you know,
right.
And possibly while high.
Johnny Velasquez was in town.
John Velasquez was, yeah. What a legend.
Johnny Murta.
And American racing's in serious trouble at the moment. I'm not even sure it'll survive another 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, with just fatalities and drugs. It's, the Racing Post an interesting article on it this week, but it's in serious. Like a lot of the tracks survive as racinos, where they're casinos to actually fund the prize money. But
I'd wonder if it's going to survive in Britain in the next 20 years.
I wouldn't be backing it.
Yeah, future a bit bleak. We're way over time, John, but happy 4th of July.
Shane and Johnny, it's been emotional.
It's been emotional and always a pleasure, as always. 9:01 AM on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. We're going to turn our attention to matters of football. We have Jonathan Wilson, football journalist, joining us on the line. Morning, Jonathan. How are things?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Brilliant, keeping well, thank you very much. I guess we'll start with Steven Gerrard. We could start in a number of places, but he's the latest big name to make this move to Saudi Arabia, deal to become the head coach of Al Ettifaq. So we're returning to management, of course, first time since being sacked by Aston Villa last October. I guess I saw Robbie Fowler was moving to the second tier in Saudi Arabia as well. Less and less surprising as the weeks go on that all these big names are heading off, I guess.
Yeah, and I think with Steven Gerrard, you were sort of starting to wonder where would his next job be. You know, I think Villa, particularly given how well it's gone since he left, I think that really has sort of damaged his reputation within England. And so would a Premier League club go for him? It's hard to imagine that. Maybe as sort of a Hail Mary last sort of month of the season in a sort of Sam Allardyce way. And then a Championship club, well, he's going to be pretty expensive. So I wonder as well whether his reputation, through no fault of his own, is damaged by sort of association with Frank Lampard, that even now we can't quite separate the two in our mind. And so the fact that Lampard failed so badly at Chelsea, that's also damaged Gerrard's reputation. So I guess going overseas where his name does still have a cachet, I guess that makes sense. And Saudi Arabia's the place everybody's going. It's where all the money is. It's interesting he's not going to one of these 4 PIF-owned clubs, but clearly, every club there has some kind of state involvement. So, the source of the money is pretty obvious.
If you were offered a job, Jonathan, over there to be a journalist, and you were offered obscene money, would you go?
No.
Why not?
Because it's very hard to take absolutely clean money, but I think there's levels of clean. So I used to work for a newspaper. I was freelance, but I used to work for a newspaper in Saudi Arabia, and I don't anymore. And that was partly sort of a mutual parting of ways. But it was partly that I was sort of thinking, I'm not comfortable with this. I also worked for one in the UAE that I left. So I think I was I took those jobs naively. I didn't really sort of think through where the money was coming from. And as I say, it's not easy in journalism to find totally clean money, but I think state ownership, when they are states with their records on human rights, I think you have to be very, very careful, and you have to think really carefully about what your values are and what you prioritise.
Yeah, I've worked for Murdoch. I've worked for the Evening Standard, which is a Leadbedev owned paper. So, I'm probably a hypocrite in this as well. But the one thing for me, Jonathan, was my club, Galway United, voted to be taken over by a Saudi, ostensibly non-government fund a few years ago, and it fell through inexplicably. But that was an interesting conflict of a lot of things, because Galway United didn't really have any assets. So I was thinking of the downsides were kind of negligible, but then really lived to regret it, looking at the Newcastle experience and the whole sports washing thing. But if you're a Newcastle fan, where are you at now?
I think it's really difficult, and I've got a lot of sympathy for people. I grew up in Sunderland. I'm a Sunderland fan. I went to watch Newcastle quite a lot when I was a kid because I had mates who were Newcastle fans, and we'd go to Sunderland one week, Newcastle the next. And I don't know what you do if your club is suddenly swallowed up and taken over by a state body. On the one hand, I guess it's very hard not to be excited for a Newcastle fan by the level of football you're playing, the fact you're back in the Champions League, the fact that you're buying players of extremely high quality. I guess that is thrilling, but I think I'd feel pretty uncomfortable about it. And the only, until you're in that position, I think it's almost impossible to know. But when Paolo Di Canio was Sunderland manager, there was a slight equivalence there. And my attitude to that was, okay, keep us up and then get out of the club as quickly as possible by whatever means that takes. And he did keep us up, and then thankfully had a really bad start to the following season and was sacked pretty quickly. So that didn't drag on. There were some Sunderland fans stopped going to games because of Di Canio's right-wing leanings. The Durham Miners particularly were very opposed to any of if you go to Sunderland now, you see the banners from miners groups are still displayed before games. That's a real core part of the club, and that clearly politically was very powerful in the 20th century and is a key part of the identity of the club. And they felt Di Canio and his politics were radically opposed to what they stood for and what the club should stand for. And I admired them for taking that stance. I still went and watched them during that time. I mean, I was not often because I was working most weekends, but occasionally I went to watch them, and I still wanted them to win. And that is a level of hypocrisy I think you can't really get around. I think if my club was taken over by a state I was utterly opposed to, I hope I would step away and hope it would be possible at some point in the future to step back into it. But it's easy for me to say, living in London, not going regularly. If you're say life would work out differently, and I'd still been up in the northeast, and that every other Saturday going to the pub with my mates, going to the game, that was sort of part of the ritual. That was the conditions in which you met your friends. That was your sort of big relaxation. Asking people to step away from that, is pretty difficult. You could go to non-league clubs, and the Northeast is replete with very, very good non-league clubs. But obviously, it's a very, very different thing.
This does. I'm almost taking over the presenting here. Sorry, Shane, but Colin did send the article that Jonathan wrote in the Guardian at the weekend. Football clubs were born to represent communities and fans, not owners. As multi-club ownership shows, the game, especially in England, has lost sight of the notion of football as a civic good. I'd implore anyone to read this article, and even Shelbourne, in Ireland, have become part of a multi-club model now here, a small club in North Dublin. But this really, I felt reading this article, it struck with me because, as you say, it's a ritual. It's something that it's nostalgic. It brings you back to the past. It brings you back to your family. It brings you back to watching TV. When there wasn't much football on TV, and then it brings you back to the present, which is pretty shit, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's probably a piece I had to wait till the close season to write, where there wasn't other stuff going on. But it's something that's been sort of nagging at me for a while. So what is a club? And the problem is there's all kinds of different models. And if you go to you have 4 Spanish clubs are member owned. Germany, at least in theory, they're all member owned, with a couple of exceptions where they were works teams. That's not a model we have in England, the idea of member-owned clubs. Some clubs lower down the pyramid, yes. Luton have Luton's situation, I sort of allied over that in the piece. But Luton are a really interesting model where it is a consortium put together by a local businessman. He's tried to get wealthy fans involved, but then the Supporters Trust has ownership over clubs' image rights. So to an extent, it can prevent Luton being used for things that fans don't want Luton to be used for. I think there's a recognition at Luton that fans alone, normal fans in inverted commas, can't provide the revenues that you need to get into the Premier League. So they are an interesting exception. But this idea of I guess to an extent, I came at this almost from a wrong angle, that I often get annoyed by the entitlement of fans and this idea of football without fans is nothing, which is kind of true, but it's also not really true, because the most important thing in football is the game, and it's the players. And the first football clubs were founded by players because they wanted to play. And what then happens through the 1870s and 1880s is that those clubs founded by players come to represent their local area. And that gives them this very, very complex relationship. And people replied to me pointing out that both Liverpool and Chelsea were founded because the people who owned the grounds needed something to generate revenue, that they weren't founded out of any kind of civic good. They were founded purely for financial reasons. And that is absolutely true. But pretty quickly, Liverpool founded early 1890s, Chelsea 1905. Pretty quickly, they had come to represent that bit of South or West London and that bit of Merseyside. They did take on that sort of civic role. But what I think is interesting is that when the league sort of drew up the regulations that govern clubs, they stipulated that no dividends were capped at 7.5%, and that no director could be employed by the club or could draw a salary from the club, could make money from the club. So until 1981, when those regulations were taken away, English clubs were not there to make a profit. There was no point in making a profit. Any profit you made, you might as well reinvest, because you couldn't take it out as a director. And so that, I think, is where you see very early on, there's this understanding on the part of the league, and the league obviously is the representation of all the clubs together. What they think they are is this club that has this civic role, partly to let people play, but also because people want to watch, and that they have a community role. And as with so much of this stuff in England, this disappears under Thatcher. And this is really hammered in 1983, when there's a government report, because football was falling apart in England at the time. But 1983, there's a government report which ends the practice of sharing gate receipts. So it used to be the case in the league, 25% of gate receipts would go to the away club, which just it tempers the advantage of the big clubs. Yes, you have an advantage if you play at Old Trafford or Anfield, or a huge stadium, but not by as much as if you're not sharing that out. I mean, we still have in the FA Cup, it's still 50% split. But that was what let the big clubs sort of run away with things. And And then the other key factor is TV revenues. That previously, and I'm absolutely not portraying the days of the local owners, 60s and 70s, as a golden age. Football in England was falling apart at that time. But at least in theory, there was a sense that you had to appeal to your local fan base, because the main revenue stream was people buying tickets, people coming through the gate. So if local people didn't want to watch your team, you had no money. Now that it's still there to an extent. We saw during the pandemic, or the consequence of the pandemic was a lot of clubs had financial difficulties. But with TV revenues becoming a bigger and bigger part of a club's budget, then that intrinsic link to the local community is slightly eroded. And one of the other features of that is you start to get a global fan base, and then clubs, I think, do have a responsibility not merely to its local community but to that global community, and that is something that I think is incredibly hard to reconcile.
This is the weird thing, Shane, which I find, and obviously there's the irony of being that Irish person, but if you go, I haven't been to Old Trafford, but I think it's more or less the same thing. You go into a cabbie in Liverpool is telling you, well, locals can't get a ticket, and loads of the locals basically have season tickets which they're flogging off for profit to the day trippers, and the association between that geezer who lives around the corner and wants to see his local team has become kind of obsolete, because it's just gone way bigger than that. And I became a Liverpool fan by virtue of TV and because of the Irish, and I don't know if you've been to games in England, but this it looks more like a load of kind of global, you can see in the audience, global day trippers rather than locals at a lot of clubs now.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that the game's not going to get away from anytime soon. It's just going to get I'm not going to use the word worse, because of course people have every right to go and support a team in a different country if they want to do it. And I've gone over to matches in England myself, so it's definitely something that's not going away. Definitely I would encourage, same as Johnny, to encourage people to read Jonathan's piece in the Guardian, that even talking about the division between fans and clubs and how it's never been as wide. Before I let you go briefly, Jonathan, we were having a debate on the show last week about Declan Rice and the price tag around Declan Rice.
Yeah, let's talk about football, Jonathan. Let's talk about football,
But was he worth the money? And I get it kind of led into the Mason Mount debate, that maybe was Mason Mount a better value signing for the price. But I guess again, money doesn't really matter in football. It's all monopoly money to us sitting here. But is Declan Rice worth the money that has been paid for him, do you reckon?
Yeah, I find it really hard to work out what prices mean, what players are worth.
Is he overrated? Sorry, I suppose it should be the question.
Well, does he make Arsenal better than they were? Yes, I think he does. Is he potentially an exceptional footballer? Yes, I think he is. Does he fit straight into the Arsenal team? Yes, absolutely does. Would I be worried if City had signed him, that the sort of monopoly position that English football seems to be moving towards, with City winning 5 for the last 6, that would be strengthened? Yeah, that would concern me. So I'm glad he's gone to Arsenal. I think he will make Arsenal better. Whether he's worth 90 million or 105 million, these are just numbers. I don't know how you possibly judge that. I guess you compare him to, say, Enzo Fernandez and say, is he of his quality? And Fernandez was 120 did Chelsea pay for him?
Yeah, he was the only one.
Well, he's maybe similar. Maybe Fernandez just that Fernandez's capacity to sort of generate space from nowhere maybe just sets him slightly above. But then, it's a different game when you're playing for Benfica or for Argentina than if you're playing for West Ham. So he's a really, really good player. Whether that's is represented by 80 million or 100 million or 120 million, I don't know. And so much is dependent on how long they've got left in their contract. And so your Mason Mount for 60 million compared to Declan Rice looks like good value, but of course he was gone the last year of his contract, so that lowers the price tag. So I don't know. I think there are exceptional cases. So I think, for instance, when Neymar moved from Barcelona to PSG and more than doubled the world transfer record in 2017, that's a price you're looking at thinking that makes absolutely zero sense. There's a reason for this beyond the value of the player. But beyond that, I think, a number is the side of the pond, and that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, I think, for us football fans and reporters, I guess, to fathom even. Jonathan, brilliant stuff as always. Thanks a million for hopping on.
Cheers, thanks. See you later.
How do Parisians think of PSG? Like, you know, what does Neymar, Messi, and fair enough, Mbappe is French, but what do they have to do with this project? And I've been to the old PSG in Parc des Princes years ago, and it was like you could feel it was of the city.
Local.
One club city, Parisians.
Yeah.
I do wonder, what
there is still that element or cohort among the fan base, obviously. Yeah, that will always be there.
I'm sure there is, but it's
changed.
It's something, and it is kind of as you get older. Like you become a Catholic because you're brought up a Catholic, right? You become a Liverpool fan or a whatever fan because your brother told you this is what to do when you were 8 years of age. You didn't know the difference. But then when you get to my age and you're 40, and you start looking at football clubs and the way Jonathan talks about them there and what it means and all the other problems in the world, and it's just like. It just kind of becomes less meaningful or something, I don't know, and especially when it's owned by like a petrol state.
Yeah, 100%. That's insane. We end up spending more time talking about non-football things now, and it's not our fault, it just is the way football is at the moment, for sure. 9:17 AM on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Going to be talking Gaelic football in just a second. Don't miss, first though, all the action in Rugby Daily today in your OTB podcast network, bringing you everything you need to know about rugby. Get your favourite local restaurants delivered to your door with Deliveroo. Just open up the app, browse some great offers, take your pick, and they'll take care of the rest. Deliveroo, food, we get it. Here are some highlights coming up on the OTB Podcast Network for you today. We've got the football pod, we've got the Monday Night Rugby, and of course the news round. After the break, Conleith Gilligan talking Gaelic football.
You're listening
to OTB AM. It's Galway versus Kilkenny, but not as you know it.
It's the fastest I've ever seen you run in your life, bro.
The Hurling Pod Live is off to the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre in Dublin this July, and you're invited.
I'll be joined by my co-host James Skell and Paul Murphy on the night.
Start the leveler, he'd say, and the tractor is coming after us.
As we debate the highs and lows of the 2023 season and preview the All-Ireland Hurling Final. Plus, we'll be announcing some more hurling legends to take the stage with us.
It was a ruck, I got confused.
It's happening on July 20th at the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events for more.
Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship.
This is what inter-county hurling is it? That's why I should have stayed at rugby.
OTB AM,
the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball.
Approaching 9:20 in this Tuesday morning's OTB, and we're going to take another look back now to the weekend's All-Ireland football, of course, quarterfinals just gone, and we kind of give a lot of love to Mayo and talked about Mayo yesterday a lot with Keith Higgins.
There wasn't much love.
No. The love was for Dublin and Kerry, I think, but we're going to turn our attention maybe a little bit more love for Derry and Monaghan. Former Derry forward Conleith Gilligan joining myself and Johnny on the line this morning. Conleith, how are things?
Things are good, Shane. Hey, Johnny.
How's it going, Con?
Derry, Conleith are like, I guess it was one of those games where two teams with similar styles between Derry and Cork. People expected Derry to get over the line, and ultimately they did, and I guess the scoreline would have been embellished a little bit more if McGuigan had put away that last minute penalty, but certainly showed elements of a really, really strong performance. Certainly didn't panic, Derry.
No, and I think this time last year, had Derry have went to Croke Park playing poorly and Shane McGuigan not being to the fore, they probably wouldn't have won. So it just shows how much Derry have developed, and also the fact that maybe in the last 36 months, the fact that Derry supporters go to Croke Park and they don't put on a big performance, we win and we leave unhappy, is probably more signs of just how this Derry team is really developing.
And it was, I think Kieran Meena made the point after the game as well. I think he had it was a nerve touched by some reporters when they suggested Derry maybe when they get to Croke Park aren't as impressive as they maybe could be. But he made the point as well that there was a swirling breeze in Croke Park maybe at the weekend that people mightn't have noticed. It wasn't a day for flamboyant football. So essentially Derry just had to get the job done, and really they did. From the very outset, Paul Cassidy, with some of the points he was kicking were very, very impressive. So a lot of positives, I think, for Meena to take from it.
Yeah, big time. Like, there was 7 different scores for Derry, and in recent times that may have been similar, but it was all about people getting 1 point, whereas Cassidy got 2 points. And even within that, Rodgers comes up with 2 points in a game he's quiet in, but he really comes to the fore at the end. So I think Derry will be very happy getting into a semi-final, having played poorly, because last year against Clare they shot the lights out and they probably put themselves up on a pedestal going into the Galway game, whereas this game, everybody will be talking about Kerry and how devastating their performance was. So I think Derry are probably in a really good place going into this.
Have they any sort of chance, Conleith? Have they any sort of chance?
Yeah, look, I absolutely think they have. Obviously, there was a nerve struck with Kieran. The criticism probably in the last 2 games with Derry and Croke Park being Galway and the Dublin final. So they have to keep it tight. They can't let Kerry away from them. But the longer it stays tight, the more difficult it becomes for Kerry. And this isn't a game that Kerry will relish, because Derry play a style in which the kicking game of Kerry won't be as effective.
That's the thing as well, because heading into the Kerry-Tyrone match, I think a lot of people, Conleith, were talking about that Tyrone midfield, Kennedy and Kilpatrick, and how dominant they'd been across the year, and one of, if not the best midfield partnerships in the country. But then you have what O'Connor and Barry did in that Kerry midfield, and just, I guess, bring a performance that not a lot of people expected. It'll be similar in that Kerry-Derry game, because they're going to be up against it again, the Kerry midfield. When you look at Glass and Rogers, again, arguably probably one of the top, certainly 2 or 3 midfield partnerships in the country.
Yeah, look, and there has been a number of them. Like, I thought Jim O'Connor and Jack Barry were both exceptional. I was one of those people who expected Kennedy and Kilpatrick to lord that, but Kerry were clever. They didn't let a midfield battle break out, because they just conceded the kick-outs to Tyrone, which took one of the strengths, which is Morgan's booming kick-out, out of it. So Kerry probably, their ego didn't get in the way. They decided, yeah, look, we might not be as good early as Tyrone here, but look, we'll hit them high. And they put that first line of 4 across the 45. They had another line of 4 across the 65. And in a game where we were expecting Tyrone to be the aggressors, it was actually Kerry who done that. And I suppose that's not something we would have expected from this Kerry team. And it was probably set up like Sean O'Shea, probably Paddy Clifford, all day was at it. And that's something that we weren't expecting. But like, where Kerry are strong, where they've legs, the likes of Gavin White I thought was exceptional, but Derry have Paul Castier, the Ethan Doherty there, they'll not be found wanting in that stake. So I think Derry match up really well.
I can't for the life of me, Conleith, see how this works for Derry now, just because Kerry have, say if they have a back 7, really, really unbelievably tigerish in the tackle, so there's no easy outlet for Derry. And I thought Derry defensively actually weren't great at times against Cork. I thought Cork got in for reasonable goal chances that better teams would have gotten at least points from. So do Derry go long from their kickouts, or do they basically try to have a possession game and bleed the life out of Kerry having the ball just to neutralise it, or how do they win this game? I just can't see it on last weekend.
Yeah, well, it'll depend on what Kerry do. Will Kerry go after Derry's kickouts, or will they decide, look, it worked against Tyrone, we'll do it again? If they give Derry possession, the longer the game stays in and around a draw, the more Derry will believe, the more they'll live into it. It's really been the games where they've went behind, where things have had to change. But I think over the last season, Derry's attacking platform has really improved and increased. Last year they were very one-dimensional with Shane McGuigan, but this year they're getting 13, 14 bodies right inside the 45, and they're holding possession. And I agree with you, defensively wasn't their best day. They coughed up balls in the tackle on Sunday, which is very uncharacteristic. Like, I can see them going back to that. They'll want to really control the tempo of this game. They'll move it out quick. They'll get 2 men up either side. They'll get 4 inside the 20. They'll try and keep the D clear, so that the likes of your Paul Casties can break through, your Brendan Rodgers, your Conor McCluskey's, and they have pace where Kerry have pace as well. So I don't think physically Derry will be found wanting. It'll be whether David Clifford can have one of the days like last week, or whether it is one of these days where he just shoots the lights out.
A couple of things just to put to you, Conleith, maybe to counter Johnny's point as to maybe not being able to make an argument for Derry. Like, Oren Lynch is brilliant, and when he comes out with the ball, like, I think his distribution from hand, if you look at Ethan Rafferty from Armagh, sometimes there are Hollywood passes that maybe give him on opportunities to score points. Oren Lynch seems to be more composed when he comes out with the ball. Often his passes from the hand lead to chances for Derry, and he rarely gives the ball away. There's also the reaction to the Cork goal as well, because that goal from Maguire brings Cork immediately back into the game, but Derry didn't panic. That word again, panic. Like, Conor Doherty scores the goal basically immediately after, so Derry managed to kind of null that mini little storm from Cork. And there's also, Conleith, and this is probably the point I want to put to you, and Mina kind of mentioned it as well after the match, like the reaction to Galway beating Derry in the semi-final last year. I feel like a lot of Derry players certainly will still feel that reaction, because they didn't show up on the day, and there were a lot of things said about Derry in the wake of that game that they just can't, they can't play in Croke Park, they can't get beyond a semi-final or whatever else. So they will, I'd imagine, be using that as fuel for this Kerry match.
No, look, they will take every avenue, and I think it probably is unfair, because they come up against Dublin in Croke Park in a final where they were missing, two of their three full back line. McAvoy didn't play, Chrissy McKeag didn't play, who are pivotal to what Derry do. So the Dublin game, and they kept Dublin to 7 points. Yes, they conceded goals, but was that really anything to worry about? Again, Galway, they played Galway, who are probably one of the most formed teams last year. So I think it's unfair to say they can't play in Croke Park. I think when you look at how much football they've played, Glen obviously were the kick of a ball last year from winning the All-Ireland club. So I think there's loads of stuff. And in Shane McGuigan, up until last weekend, he loved Croke Park. I don't see Shane McGuigan being as quiet again, but this Kerry defence has been very, very mean. And I think if Derry are to pull off this win, I think they're going to need Shane McGuigan, Conor Glass, Rodgers, Chrissy McKeag to have the games of their lives. That's just the reality of where Kerry are. Reigning All-Ireland champions, they've really struggled a wee bit, but they've started to hit a wee bit of form now. So, but I still would make a case for Derry. It will be difficult. They will have to get everything right, but I still think that they're in a good place because they're back-to-back Ulster champions again. No mean feat. They needed to get promotion. They needed to beat Dublin and Celtic Park. They needed to beat Cork, playing Purley. Everything they've had to do, they have done. And yeah, it's been quiet, it's been under the radar, but that'll not bother them one bit.
How do you expect Derry to marshal David Clifford? I know there can be sometimes too much focus put on Clifford when you look at the rest of Kerry's forward line, and there are of course other dangers there. Is it someone like a Chrissy McKeag? I know Chrissy's 33, but he's still brilliant, and someone who just, I guess, is willing to forego his own game to take someone else out of the game? Or do you give it to someone else in that Derry backline?
Sorry, I just lost a wee bit of that, Shane, but yeah, just to take on that point I think you were making, it's not enough for Chrissy McKeag on his own. You have to accept that David Clifford is going to kick half a dozen points playing Purley, but it's trying to limit that and not overly, because Tyrone focused on David Clifford, but it was Sean O'Shea who kicks 1-5. Jeremy O'Connor kicks 1-2. That's the problem. You can shut down one of the Cliffords and then somebody else comes to the fore. So I think defensively it will have to be a team game. They will have to cut down all the spaces. They can't give cheap opportunities and you can't give goals. But you had to go back to 2016 from the last time Kerry scored 2 goals in Croke Park in the championship. So Kerry having him as free scoring in front of goal, as probably last weekend suggested. So I think Derry will keep it tight. I don't think there'll be ball to kick. Kerry are going to have to run ball, but they'll be equally comfortable there. But Chrissy McKeag's as good a player mark as possible. But if he hits form, there really is no marking off him. He just is that good.
Yeah, looking forward to these 2 semi-finals.
They're going to have to be uber defensive, aren't they? Realistically,
they have to.
So you can't go anywhere near. Tyrone are probably too aggressive in the way they played, in the sense that let's go a little bit. I would have thought Derry are going to have to make this a horrible game and try to hold on to the ball and smother Kerry out of it, because I don't see any other way. But maybe I'm wrong.
Possibly. Before we let you go, Conleith, and hopefully the line holds up there. But the Monaghan Armagh game, I know you were covering that one as well. Just pure and utter drama. 17 penalties scored out of 20. Armagh possibly played into Monaghan's hands with the way they said about it, but I guess those 2 clutch moments from Rian O'Neill and Conor McManus were the talking points, really. Just pure and utter cool, calm and collective from the pair of them.
Yeah, look, the game itself, it probably was a better game when you were there. It didn't probably look great on TV, but there was excitement. It was a really tough tactical battle. The matchups, all those things that people who like modern football got out of that game. But in contrast, Gary Mohan, there was so many big performances. McCarthy again is an all-star form. That move after the half-time and the Tyrone Monaghan match to bring McCarthy to wing half-back has been inspired. And I think Monaghan deserves serious credit. It's been a tough year, but they're there now. They've beaten Dublin before in really important games, and while everybody will be talking up a Kerry Dublin final, I think Monaghan and Derry both have real big says in it. But credit to Monaghan. I think what Vinnie Curry and his brother Martin have done there have been incredible.
Yeah, you've whetted my appetite. That's why I love getting you on, Conleith. You'll always give me a little sliver of hope. That's all I want. A sliver of hope is all we need. Monaghan and Derry final to look forward to. We'll touch base before then, no doubt. Conleith, great stuff as always. Thanks for hopping on.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Conleith Gilligan there, former Derry forward.
People who like modern football. That's an interesting. People who like interesting 5 words, because like it's. I think it's a really spiritual debate at the moment that we got to earlier on in the show, and we're ending on that. People who like modern football, there's an awful lot to like about it.
Yeah, and look, at that point you made earlier, would you take a neutral to a match? And I think I would. Like, I'd take a neutral to Monaghan Dublin or to Derry Kerry. Those games could go either way. You know, Monaghan might have to play negatively to beat Dublin. Derry might have to play negatively to beat Kerry. But at the end of the day, that's just. I think the drama will still be there. You know, if the games are tight heading down the stretch, and I hope both games are, just from a spectacle perspective.
I think the problem, Shane, is that like in games like that are billed as these like close games, like the 2 main games that we got at the weekend, when they're utterly decided before the final quarter, like almost early in the second half, that's the deflating bit where the crowd becomes almost disengaged, and you know the Kerry fans almost stop cheering because it's like, well, we don't want to, you know, kick someone on the ground here. And the same the Mayo. Like, I think football when it's played to the extent that the good team is so dominant, is hard to watch. But like, I'm like you, like the Monaghan victory at the weekend, the way that game went for me is actually, if you're there, that's engrossing, because there's so much going on, and it's still right. If you don't like the way this game is played, you come and tell me how to win it, because this is to me the optimum way that Monaghan have to win this game.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, getting over the line essentially. And
the skill levels are amazing at times. Look at Conor McManus. Like,
some of the stuff that was happening was like, even when winning the free and kicking over the free from the under the Hogan stand with his first touch, I think.
And if you're in the Hogan when David Clifford does that, even in a dead rubber game at this stage, you're like, here.
Yeah, mad stuff.
You know, and I still think the skill level, some of Dublin's kicking in the second half, it's insane. Like 100%. Insane. And don't completely knock the game when all this is happening. Like,
look, I sat down to watch the Dublin Mayo game, nearly with popcorn in my hands, hoping for an absolute spectacle in the first half. Didn't disappoint, but then it kind of pulled away and petered out, of course. And presumably, majority of Kerry and Tyrone fans were probably halfway home by the time Monaghan and Armagh threw in. Do you know that a lot of them wouldn't have maybe bothered staying around for the second game? I'm sure a lot of them did as well. But from a spectacle perspective, a couple of the games that we expected to be tighter, maybe just not delivering.
It's funny. Like, briefly, I have an article in the hurling programme Sunday, and like, I can't envisage anything but a very, very close games there, where I could see 2 whitewashes in the football semi-finals. With all due respect, I could see both Kerry and Dublin winning by at least 10 points. A lot of pundits will like, because if it starts in a way that if Kerry go 4 or 5 points up, done, absolutely done. If Dublin go 4 or 5 points up first half, done. It could be obliterated, because Monaghan have to come out of their shell, Derry have to come out of their shell. That's not going to happen in the hurling.
Yeah, and I think the bookies have it like a 3-point spread for Kerry to beat Derry, and 6 points maybe for, which is interesting. Probably.
I think Kerry will win by closer to 10 than 3. But I mean, the bookies are more accurate than me.
Yeah, remains to be seen. Johnny, great stuff this morning. Thanks a million for happening as always. On tomorrow's OTB AM, we will have the Kilkenny legend Tommy Welch live in studio, no less. Alan Quinlan will discuss the under-20s game against Fiji. We'll have Stacey Flood and we'll have Jason Quigley as well with us. Right now though, Matt Williams from last night's show. Have a terrific Tuesday.
You're very welcome. Always happy to bring in Mr. Matt Williams. Long time no talk. I hope the French summer is treating you well. Hello.
Hello, Jay. Great to see you, mate. I'm actually talking here from northern Spain. On holidays, I've got my son over, Teddy, who you've met. We've got father and son 4 days in northern Spain. So I'm trying to show him the architectural and cultural delights of the area, and he's got Biggie Small trying to educate me on the music in the car on the drive. So I think I'm losing out again as a father on that one. But no, it's lovely to be with you, mate. Great to talk to you.
Okay, lovely. And so he didn't mind you ignoring him to watch the Ashes for the last 5 days, no?
Mate, we've been listening to it and watching it and putting it on and carrying it and screaming and yelling at each other and in despair and then in joy. It's been a great. The 2 tests have been fantastic, Joe. Yeah. Been really great entertainment, high drama, lots of controversy, and lots of this last one, lots of yelling and bad behaviour from a lot of people. So, but yeah, been compelling sport.
Well, I did want to have you on to talk cricket and rugby. I know it's very much rugby umbrella here, and we'll come to the Nations Championship in a moment. But so on the cricket front, day 5 of this second test, and people would have seen the clips of the usually very genteel long room at Lord's up in arms as the Australian players walked through, and chants of cheat and your disgrace, basically lots of very angry posh people, I think, and Australian players half smiling and half grunting back. So this is to do with Alex Carey's quote-unquote controversial stumping of Johnny Bairstow, and the point here is that there are the rules of the game and there is the spirit of the game, and the Australians betrayed the spirit of the game. Even Rishi Sunak, for all that is wrong with English politics at the moment, even Rishi Sunak is commenting on this at the moment and giving out about the Australians. So I don't know, I don't have a great understanding of this situation the way you would. How egregious was the stumping of Johnny Bairstow?
It's certainly controversial, Joe. Look, I played cricket all my life, and I've seen that often. It's hard to explain to people, and I think, if you read the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian papers, they're on the opposite side. They're saying with the English, the behaviour of the members of the MCC in the Lord's Long Room was an absolute disgrace, and they have apologised to the players. My friend, a great mate from Australia, happened to be there and filmed it, and you couldn't believe it. If you saw it at a Millwall soccer match when they were at their worst in the 80s, you'd say, okay, well, that's what they do. It was really appalling. Just so your listeners know, what happens is in cricket, you have the three stumps in the ground, and about a metre and a bit in front of that is what we call your batting crease. So the batsman has to be inside that crease. If the opposition team hit the wood of the stumps and knock the bails off and you're outside the crease, you're out. And what Bairstow did was he literally didn't play at a shot. It went to the wicketkeeper and he stepped outside the crease thinking it was over.
Yeah.
Now, the rules of the game say it's not over. Now, the argument is, was it against the spirit of the game? Again, the Sydney Morning Herald, it's a great headline. It said, here's the rules of Lord's Long Room Fight Club. Rule 1, know the rules. And it was referred to the umpires who said he was out. They referred it up to a third, what we call a third umpire, who's basically a TMO, who also said it's out. So technically, and within the law books, he was definitely out. As I said, I've seen it. Now, the English didn't like it. They said it's against the spirit of the game. Now, here's the other one. Now, I don't know this. I've only read this. It's saying that Bairstow in the first test, tried to do it to one of the Australian batsmen, but missed the stumps. So, look, I do think it was a great test. It was exciting. Ben Stokes' innings after that, I think he got 145, was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Cricket from him, some of the best batting I've ever seen in my life. But this has overruled the whole thing. And the behaviour and the commentary from the English from day one has been really offensive. And you've got to understand, Joe, I'll come back a little bit. Australians play cricket really hard. They are. When I play cricket, everything is really hard. It is absolutely down on brass knuckles, on fighting, on how you do it. They play it a very, very hard, aggressive way. And the English have started to play a very similar way, and it's been really entertaining. And they're calling it Bazball after their coach. But they've just been bragging, been really, really disrespectful from day one to the Australians, like the chanting and the stuff they've been giving the Australians. And so what do they expect? The Australians are just giving it back. And that's exactly what's occurred in this instance.
Well, I've also seen what you read, that Bairstow attempted something very similar to what happened to him on day 3. And there have been numerous other examples of England doing it in the past, including against New Zealand, against Colin de Grandhomme when he was out of his crease as well. So against the spirit of the game it may be, but it does seem to be reasonably commonplace. So there's a degree in what you do about nothing. Is this so significant? I mean, to be fair, maybe what happened in the clubhouse is kind of so memorable. It will always be remembered in tandem with this Australian win. But will it overshadow it forever? There's not an asterisk beside this win because of this. That'd be going too far, I presume, would it?
Oh yeah. And again, this is straight down national lines. So as you say, the Prime Minister of England's weighed in, and the Prime Minister of Australia's also weighed in, which is your loss. Get on with it.
Okay.
And both of them are politicians. They're both playing politics. The Australians are saying, look, yeah, okay, it's tough.
Yeah.
But if that was done to us, if I'm deadly serious,
yeah.
If that was done to us, I'd be saying to our batsmen, you're stupid, mate. You've got to wait inside your crease until it's over. Yeah. And that's the first one. As a batsman, when you're a kid going out the bat, that's one of the first things you're shown. You've got to have your feet or your bat inside that line at all times. And the ball is dead. Well, in cricket, we said the ball's bowled, hits the wicket keeper, there's a few seconds, the ball's dead. But the keeper, Kerry, caught it and immediately threw it down. So I didn't see that live. I was listening to it, and I was listening to the BBC. Of course, I'm in Europe and I can't get the Australian commentary. So I listened to the BBC and they were aggrieved. And when I saw it, I straight away said, no, that's out. As far as I'm concerned, it's a shame for England because I think they might have won the test with Besto there. But as far as the rules of the game and how we would play it in Australia, and I've seen it done in Australia often, if you step outside your crease, you're fair game, and that's your fault, not the fielding side's fault.
Okay, fair enough. Let's turn to rugby then. There was a big announcement on Saturday. Look, I as far as I can remember, there's been an effort to try and sort out the rugby calendar, and I would think it dates back to 95 and beyond, and you'd be au fait with the many efforts to sort out the calendar. But on Saturday, I think reasonably significant, a joint announcement from Sanzar and the Six Nations that the Nations Championship, that is a working title by the way, but the Nations Championship is what they're calling it for the time being, will begin in 2026. They do need World Rugby to rubber stamp this in the autumn, which is interesting, but I guess they're confident-ish of that happening. So the plan is, for anybody who hasn't heard the announcement, this will be held every 2 years in even-numbered years. The World Cup and thankfully the Lions Tours will survive. If you're a lover of Lions Tours, they will very much remain as was. So this will be a 12-team competition. There's 6 teams in the Six Nations, and then the 4 teams in the Rugby Championship: New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, South Africa, and 2 more, most likely Japan and Fiji. And so every July, every Six Nations team will play the 3 Southern Hemisphere opponents and then host the remaining 3 teams at home in November. So they'll still travel in July and they'll be at home in November, and it will culminate in a World Grand Final, and there'll be a relegation component from 2030. The big nations want the first couple of years to bed in and get comfortable, but the likes of Samoa, Tonga, Japan, Romania, Georgia, Spain, etc. can, in theory, I guess, unlike in Six Nations or the Rugby Championship, in theory they can get to the top table. Look, I have to say, at a glance, I was punching the air. I mean, this whets the appetite. I'll watch this, no problem. What's your immediate response?
25 years too late, Joe, but it's thank heavens it came through. Thank heavens it came through. This wipes out all the anomalies of Ireland only playing Australia in 2019 and then last year, of Eddie Jones. The whole time Eddie Jones coached England, he was 7 years, he played New Zealand once. France have played South Africa once since 2017. The non-Six Nations games and non-World Cup games have been run like they were run in 1890. Basically people ringing each other up, would you like a game, we're trying to make money and so on. So this, and that's why those of us that aren't cynicals, but understand the workings, see the world rankings as they currently are as very fallible and very loose, because not everyone is playing each other on a regular basis. So this takes that out of the equation. It also takes out the 4-year cycle of the World Cup, which I think is very good, because people too often say, oh, look, we're building for a World Cup. And therefore that gives them the nations this opportunity to not focus on winning and being really active in their coaching and alignment and planning. So with this, every 2 years, that means you have a World Cup year, you'll have the Nations Championship, then you'll, as you say, working title, you'll have the Lions, and then another one, and then another World Cup year. So this gives real meaning to the summer tours as we have known them, and the November autumn internationals or friendlies, and there's no such thing as a friendly, and now that's dead. And I think that's a really, really good thing. It also is a very good thing for an organised process for Tier 2. And I again, it's Japan and Fiji, and I watch this space for America, for the United States, because they have the World Cup following, and the MLR, the Major League Rugby, is just coming to its conclusion on its 6th season, and it's sustainable and holding up. And they are pushing very much for America to lift. And I would suspect that very shortly America will be trying, the American Eagles, which is their national team, will be pushed into that 6th spot in the South to try and give them a boost. So there's a whole lot of ramifications for that, but all positive. And of course, the other one, Joe, is it's keeping South Africa in the championship and not bringing them into the Six Nations. I think and there was a lot of pressure coming for the Six Nations committee to do that. It would have been a giant mistake for World Rugby on every front if they haven't. And you are exactly right. The significance of this announcement is it's a combined agreement with SANZAAR and the Six Nations. So these are the two big organisations, the South and North, getting together and saying, let's do it, let's keep player welfare high. The negative for me, Joe, the only negative, is we are still bound by the length of the season that the French and English clubs want, which is why we have these two windows. And until we change that, and I can't see how that's going to change. Until we change that, we have a very, very long season for the players. Yes. That's my only negative in what I think is a very positive step.
No, fair point. Yeah. So as you say, owned and operated by SANZAAR and the Six Nations, not World Rugby. Yeah. This is not a World Rugby owned venture, so I'm sure they're spitting. I'm sure they'd quite like to own that.
They would, Joe. I think this is a great victory for the reformists within World Rugby. And as you know, I'm a real critic of the lack of reform of the laws and the structures of the game from World Rugby, because there are lots of groups within World Rugby that are purely there serving their self-interest, as in the interest of their nation, not the interests of the game. They're not taking the broader interest of rugby as a global sport, and I am very, very critical of those people. When Bernard Laporte left, I thought this was lost, because he was a great proponent of this. Your listeners may know he was the president of the French Rugby Union. Unfortunately, he was found to have taken a bribe and had to step down. Now, there's a lot of controversy over that in France as well, but that's where it is now. Somewhere in that process, the reformists have been able to find the common ground, and the common ground is to take it out of World Rugby's grasp and to give it to the Six Nations and the championship, SANZAAR, in the South. That seems to have been the piece of political machinations that allowed this to go through, and a genius move from the people involved, because it has taken those negative people, the negative votes away, put it into a progress, and also enhance the Tier 2 nations. And that is huge. It is huge to enhance the Tier 2 nations. So, a great piece of politics and a very positive move for the game across the globe.
So again, 2026 is when this is due to be launched. Relegation will kick in from 2030. In terms of player welfare, it does seem, based on the couple of pieces I've read, and this is early days, certainly it will mean one extra test match per year, maybe two. Yeah. There's talk of the Six Nations losing one of their rest weeks, which I guess is not ideal, but I guess the calendar is so squeezed, they have to squeeze somewhere. So that's where we are on that. You wrote I thought it was a fascinating piece, just looking ahead to the World Cup at large in the Irish Times at the weekend, and seeing as we're talking about the global calendar, you made a great point on South Africa, which I hadn't fully appreciated. So as we know, their clubs are very much fighting on a European front now, whereas the national side is still Southern Hemisphere facing. So by way of contrast, Ireland will play them at the World Cup. The Irish players wound up after the Heineken Champions Cup final. They've had time off, they've had a break, they've come together in camp now, which I'm sure is done at a very nice leisurely pace as they try and get up to full fitness come September. Whereas the South Africans, I mean, far from them having a rest after a long club season and lots of flights up and down to Europe, they're lacing up their boots and they're playing in the Rugby Championship now. And so come World Cup final, were they to get to the World Cup final match, you were making the point that many of these South African players, admittedly with a few breaks in there, but they'll have been basically in continuous competition either at club level or for South Africa in the Rugby Championship this summer for almost 15 months. Now that is a lot of hotels and a lot of flights and a lot of just on the go and adrenaline, and I guess you haven't really appreciated the danger of burnout for South Africa. Like maybe they get through this year, I don't know, but it's not a sustainable model for a lot of those guys, surely.
It's Joe. This is what I and a lot of other people who have been on that circuit and know how difficult it is and how draining. You kept saying, how are they going to do this? And you imagine then if they came into the Six Nations, how do you do long haul turnarounds between South Africa and the North and play on consecutive weeks at altitude? Like it's just asking the athletes to do something crazy. So I'm glad that's out of the way. But I think it was the Stormers has done 9 long-haul flights in the season to Europe for their games, and everyone saw them cheering when Leinster lost. Mate, they weren't cheering because they thought they could beat Munster. They were cheering they didn't have to get on an aeroplane again to fly up north. They could have it at home.
Yeah.
You know, and they were going, thank God we could sleep in our own beds. Now, it didn't do them any good, and Munster deserve huge credit for that. But the model that the South Africans are pursuing is not sustainable, in my opinion, because then if you look at what the July window does, so for this Nations Cup, they'll have a July window. Then after that, they'll step into the Tri-Nations, to the Championship. It used to be the Tri-Nations, the Championship with Argentina, Australia. So they've got 2 rounds each. So they'll be playing through October. What do they do then? They go back to their clubs and keep playing in Europe and the URC. I'm looking at it going, well, they're going to have to say to the clubs, right, there's a 2-month period where you don't have them. Otherwise, I'm not sure how you do it. Now, they are rested. They are taken out for periods of time. They are put in training camps. But it's the emotional and mental recovery, too, that I think people really underestimate. That we saw, I think that build up on Michael Hooper and last season and caused Michael to say, look, I just can't cope here. I need a couple of months off. What we're asking our athletes to do, especially in the South with the long haul flights where you're going between Australia and New Zealand, Argentina and South Africa, across the Indian Ocean and across the Pacific Ocean and back again and then having to play, it's unbelievably draining emotionally and physically on the players after a period of time. And that fatigue is accumulative, Joe, as we often talk about. So how the South Africans managed it in the long run remains to be seen. I actually think in the pool stages, I think they'll be okay. It's when you start coming into 4 or 5 giant test matches in a row, they might find themselves vulnerable. You might find some injuries and they might find themselves vulnerable at the end of the World Cup. I think there's still going to be a handful in Paris for Ireland. But if they get through the quarters and so on, that's where it could be a really difficult time for them.
Yeah, be very understandable. You were impressed with the Super Rugby final, Crusaders and the Chiefs, and not least the breakdown. That has intensified in a big way. In short, you think New Zealand will be just fine at this World Cup?
Oh yeah, they never. I know. When Ireland went down there and played so magnificently, and you know, it is one of the greatest moments in Irish sport ever. And the New Zealanders went into crisis mode. Mate, give me a crisis like that any day of the week. They're not in crisis. They are a handful. The breakdown across the semi-finals, the playoffs, the quarters, the semis, and the final. The New Zealanders at the breakdown were just absolutely incredible. Just on a side note, Joe, to be fair to the Australians, they competed quite well, especially the Brumbies, and the Reds improved, and so did the Warriors. Weren't up to the job, but they're not a million miles behind now. The other 2 Australian sides are a long way behind. But the 3 Australian sides, out of that, especially the Brumbies playing so well, they'll put together a good 23. But the New Zealanders at the breakdown were so low to the ground, so precise, so aggressive, so technically excellent. And not just once or twice during the game. I was watching it just in awe of what they were doing consistently. And the Crusaders in particular forced so many turnovers. Now as did the Chiefs, where they were very good as well. But the Crusaders were above them. And and created these turnovers or penalties that stop the opposition playing. And that's going to be a key. And I think we saw a lot of that from La Rochelle as well. When you've got a team that is so dominant at the breakdown, they either still, and that's the bottom line. What's the best form of attack? Defence, rather get the ball back. And that's what the New Zealanders were doing exceptionally well. And, anyone that thinks they're out of sorts or they're not contenders, that's really madness. They are going to be a real handful at the World Cup. And I actually think they're going to surprise a few people, because there's one thing that they are, and that's they're hurt and they're angry. And that's when the Kiwis are very dangerous, very, very dangerous.
I don't really know what to say with the next story, but previously Warren Gatland would take his team off to Poland and get them extraordinarily fit. So it seems for this World Cup, it's more a psychological challenge he's looking for. So he was talking here the other week to The Guardian about their recent preparation week that they had. He said it was a psychological challenge that we put them through. They did some power endurance stuff. They were carrying logs uphill and then having to go into a pool. Okay, fair enough, I guess. But then he says we were talking about putting them in uncomfortable positions and asking, how do you get your heart rate back down? How do you get your composure back? They did some stuff where we put them in hoods and had water tipped over them. So, like waterboarding. When they weren't expecting it, the water was poured. And then we played them babies crying, things going off. And then we had a few beers in the afternoon. So, I don't know. I mean, look, if it works, he's a genius, but wouldn't be for me, Matt. I don't know.
Oh, man, I was embarrassed when I read that. I was truly embarrassed when I read that. I just thought, really? So I've heard this, and I've been involved in it time again. I was assistant coach of the Waratahs many years ago, and they took us down to the SAS, have a base on Sydney Harbour, Australian SAS, and much of Sydney Harbour is military because it's owned by the Navy. And they took us down at night, put us in the harbour with flippers, and we had to swim about 3 k's as a group, linking arms in the dark in night in Sydney Harbour. Now, was it scary? Yeah. Did we have to overcome that fear? Yeah. Was it challenging? Yeah. And as one of the guys said to me as we're getting out of the water, he looked at me and says, if we could only get those other buggers in this water, we'd boot them. You don't play them in the water. You don't play them with masks over your head and babies crying. It's not something I'm a fan of, Joe. And a lot of, does it make the Kiwis, when they won the America's Cup, had a saying. When they made a decision, does it make the boat go faster? Yeah. If it makes the boat go faster, they do it. If it doesn't, they don't. Does that make Wales play better? Well, I can't see it. I can't see how that sort of day has anything with it, because for every player that gets something out of it, there's going to be another 2 who think that is just stupidity. Yes. I'm not a soldier. I'm a rugby player. How's that going to help me? How's that going to move me forward? And so many teams have tried it, and I've yet to see someone that comes out and say, well, that was a day. That was the day that turned us, when we're getting waterboarded.
Yeah. I must say, I would be one of the players thinking, really? You would lose me.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Off the Ball Daily.